Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, host of The Dana Show, Dana Lash.
Good morning, Cpac. Good morning, you guys. I love seeing all of you people here. I love seeing the youth here. I want to thank the ACU. I want to thank everybody at Cpac for making this possible every single year, because this is the time when we fellowship, we make those connections, we exchange ideas, and we realize that we've really taken some ownership. I just want to say really quickly, this past election has proven more than anything that we are the big tent party. We are the big tent party. You have to think, this last election, we have been able to pull stalwart Democrats away from Hillary Clinton because they got tired of hearing about how they were going to afford their health care premiums and pay for the roof over their head with pronouns and which bathroom they could use. That's what they were told all throughout the election. And if anything, what this last election has proven to us is that your 80% friend does not have to be your 20% enemy. We learned that this past election. We are conservatives. We have the superior product. We don't have to modify our views. We don't have to rationalize why we believe what we believe. We don't need platitudes and red meat, because we have the superior product, the proven superior product. We saw this with tax reform, did we not? You cannot lie to people about what's in their 401k. You can't lie to them about what's in their paycheck, although the media they try very hard to do that. I want to say one more thing about the conservative movement, then we're going to have a little conversation about last night. We don't need to look for the next conservative messiah, because that spirit, that fire that was in Buckley, that fire that was in Reagan, is in each and every one of us. We are the power of this movement. And my dear friend and late mentor once said that if you can't sell liberty, you suck. And that's true. So let's have a conversation about last night, shall we? Because the conservative movement, we've been so incredibly successful. We saw that when we expanded the tent. We saw that when we took over social media. And statists had to innovate to outsmart us, or try to outsmart us. They had to change their algorithms to suppress our speech on social media platforms. They try to ignore us, and they try to change Google rankings, because we are a voice that they can no longer ignore. And try as they might to spin it, they are unsuccessful. And they have been. Now I'm going to say something that some people are going to say is controversial. So I'll say it really slowly so all the people on the platform in the back can hear me loud and clear. Many in legacy media love mass shootings. You guys love it. Now, I'm not saying that you love the tragedy, but I am saying that you love the ratings. Crying white mothers are ratings gold to you and many in the legacy media in the back. And notice I said crying white mothers, because there are thousands of grieving black mothers in Chicago every weekend, and you don't see town halls for them, do you? Where's the CNN town hall for Chicago? Where's the CNN town hall for sanctuary cities? Where was the CNN town hall for Jamil Shaw Sr., whose son was murdered by someone who illegally entered the country and had been deported repeatedly? Where was his voice? Where was the voice of those junior ROTC members last night, CNN? If it bleeds, it leads, doesn't it? And I don't mean to ignore you all here, but I I'm really looking at a lot of the legacy media back there on the platform. And you can write whatever you want about me, and you can come find me in the hallways, and you can scream at me, and you can try to confront me. But I'm here. We're not going anywhere. I call BS. If it bleeds, it leads, but it has to be the right people from the right communities at the right time. Let me just explain something to you all. I think it was insane that I was the hardest questioner on the Broward County Sheriff last night. How is that possible? Washington Navy Yard, Garland, Texas, Fort Hood, Charleston, Boston, San Bernardino, Orlando, Parkland. Do you know what all of these mass tragedy incidents involved? FBI dropped the ball. They dropped the ball. Now, I'm allergic to universal statements, just like I'm allergic to people who think Green Day is punk. But let me just be clear. In Charleston, this murderer was able to pass a background check, even though he was a prohibited possessor, because, as former FBI Director James Comey said, they made a mistake. It was a paperwork error. Sutherland Springs, this mass murderer was able to go and mow down a church because why? The Air Force did not report his conviction, the fact that he was mentally unstable, to the NICS system, which, by the way, the organization that I represent, 5 million plus members, average everyday Americans, moms and dads. They do the school run. They go to the grocery store. They're students. They're hunters. They're people like me who simply don't want to be assaulted in the parking lot if I go to the grocery store and get a gallon of milk at night. They are people like us, and we will not be gaslighted into thinking that we are responsible for a tragedy that we had nothing to do with. It is not our job to follow up on red flags. It is not our job to make sure that states are reporting to the background check system. It is not our job. A failure of law enforcement is not a failure of the law. It is a failure of enforcement. Now, if all of those in the legacy media are arguing for the NRA to give us the authority and the resources to go and follow up on these red flag events, I'll volunteer right here now to do it. We have resources available at anyone's disposal if they want to reinforce their schools. But I'll say it again loud and clear. We're parents too. And I believe, as the millions of members that make up the NRA, and I think millions of people just in the United States in general, don't you think our kids deserve the same protection as our celebrities? Don't you all think that our kids deserve the same protection as our athletes, as our banks, as our businesses? But yet we leave them the most unprotected. My condemnation is for those at the FBI. I know there's some good agents there, but for those at the FBI who dropped the ball 8 separate times with catastrophic consequences. You know, James Comey, when he wasn't busy taking directions from Loretta Lynch as to what to call Hillary Clinton's investigation or writing his self-aggrandizing memoirs, you know, he said they made a mistake. Maybe if you politicized your agency less and did your job more, we wouldn't have these problems. I want to make this super obvious point. The government has proven that they cannot keep you safe. And yet, some people want all of us to disarm. You heard that town hall last night. They cheered the confiscation of firearms, and it was over 5,000 people. I had to have a security detail to get out. I wouldn't have been able to exit that if I did not have a private security detail. There were people rushing the stage and screaming, "Burn her." And I came there to talk solutions, and I still am going to continue that conversation on solutions, as the NRA has been doing for before I was alive. But the government can't keep you safe, and some people want us to give up our firearms and rely solely upon the protection of the same government that's already failed us numerous times to keep us safe. And then they also call Trump a tyrant, but then say that they want the president to also confiscate our firearms. Try to figure that one out. You know, after the Parkland tragedy, media was rushing to identify who this person was, and Politico ran a headline that said, "A white nationalist said he's one of us." Here's a message for people in the legacy media, many of you, not all, but a lot of you. Don't trust white nationalists. Don't use them as sources. Don't trust them. Senator Byrd's legacy lives on, I guess. If you take anything from my remarks to you today, and I say this to the reporters in the media, I say this to the people at Slate and the Salon and Think Progress and Media Matters and the people who we keep clothed and fed because their beats are us, right? That's some job creation. I want you to all ask yourselves, where are the stories about how only 38 states submit less than 80% of criminal convictions to the background check system? It's only as good as what's submitted to it. How many of you knew that? No. Why isn't Dianne Feinstein calling for that? I have to question whether or not they want this system to fail. Where are those headlines? Where are those headlines? Where are the headlines? And you know, by the way, do you realize that those are millions of people who have been adjudicated mentally unfit or criminally dangerous that are able right now to go and purchase a firearm because the politicians who are given the most lip service about it have done the least about this. They could change this tomorrow. They could change it today. But they won't because they're exploiting a tragedy for an agenda. Shame on you. We call BS. Where are the stories about how, here's a stat for you, from 1950 to July of 2016, 98.4% of mass shootings have taken place in gun-free zones. That's a fact. You guys are welcome to go. It's all online. I mean, there's this thing called Google. It's maybe the same place that you found the white nationalist to quote for your political headline, but, you know, just be careful, vet your sources. Fake news and all, you know. One of the things that you saw in this video before I came out, because a lot of people have been asking what I'm going to do next, God bless America that I can stay in Dallas, Texas. And God bless America that I'm able to join a group of people at the NRA and NRA TV to bring you an hour-long program every day beginning in March, no commercial breaks. None. We're going to show the media how fisking is done. And fisk those in the legacy media that insist on ignoring the real headlines, that insist on ignoring what is the cause of tragedy. You know, I was sitting on that stage with the Broward County Sheriff, and the toughest question I was asking this man, how did you fail 39 times? They had a law enforcement go to this murderer's house 39 times. He was caught taking bullets and knives in a backpack to his school. He had threatened repeatedly to shoot up his school. He was out there in plain sight using his name on social media accounts, sending messages to students that violated a Florida state statute that meant that that sheriff could have gone to his house that night and it had him involuntarily committed. Why didn't he? Why didn't you, Sheriff? That's not the NRA's job. That's yours. I'm joining NRA TV, and I'm really excited about bringing you stories that matter. And by the way, if anybody at Slate or New York Times or anyone else needs a refresher on what FISC means, I'll be at the NRA TV booth later on this afternoon. And by the way, we can also explain to you what Anglo-Saxon heritage also means in the discussion of law enforcement and sheriffs and all of that, because I know that's a big obstacle for a lot of people in media too. All right, so I do not want to cut into the Vice President's time, so I'm going to leave you with a couple of points of advice here. Always remember, always, and especially for you younger, awesome activists who are the future of our movement, politics is downstream from pop culture. If it happens It's going to happen in culture first before it happens in policy. Remember that. A very good friend of mine said that, a mentor of mine, God rest his soul. Never, ever, ever compromise your principles, ever. It is your job to change hearts and minds, not the government. A free people have the right to criticize and hold accountable our free press. We are free, we are conservative, our principles are proven, and to anybody out there who says that conservatism is dead, I declare here and now that we are just getting started, and it will be you who is left in the dustbin of history. God bless you all. God bless the Second Amendment. Have a great week.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. We have serious discussions ahead and serious issues that impact each and every one of us. Just a week ago, we were all horrified by another terrible tragedy at an American school. Each and every member of the National Rifle Association mourns the loss of the innocent and continues to keep their families and that community in our prayers. We share a goal of safe schools, safe neighborhoods, and a safe country. As usual, the opportunist wasted not 1 second to exploit tragedy for political gain. Saul Alinsky would have been proud. The breakback speed of calls for more gun control laws, and the breathless national media eager to smear the NRA. Think about that. In the midst of genuine grief and a very understandable passion, as millions of Americans search for meaningful solutions, what do we find? Chris Murphy, Nancy Pelosi, and more, cheered on by the national media, eager to blame the NRA and call for even more government control. They hate the NRA. They hate the Second Amendment. They hate individual freedom. In the rush of calls for more government, they've also revealed their true selves. The elites don't care not one whit about America's school system and school children. If they truly cared, what they would do is they would protect them. For them, it's not a safety issue, it's a political issue. They care more about control and more of it. Their goal is to eliminate the Second Amendment and our firearms freedoms so they can eradicate all individual freedoms. What they want are more restrictions on the law-abiding. Think about that. Their solution is to make you, all of you, less free. They want to sweep right under the carpet the failure of school security, the failure of family, the failure of America's mental health system, and even the unbelievable failure of the FBI. They fantasize about more laws stopping what other laws fail to stop. The truth is, laws succeed only when people obey them. That's what the law-abiding majority in this country practices. But once again, so many existing laws were ignored. Their laws don't stop illegal criminals from crossing our borders every single day. Their laws don't stop the scourge of gang violence and drug crime that savages Baltimore, Chicago, and every major American community. Their laws haven't stopped the plague of opioids and Chinese fentanyl from Mexico that floods American streets and kills victims every single day in this country. No wonder law-abiding Americans all over this country revere their Second Amendment freedom to protect themselves more than ever. They don't care if their laws work or not. They just want to get more laws, to get more control over people. But the NRA does care. We at the NRA are Americans who continue to mourn and care and work every day at contributing real solutions to this very real problem. Real practical action to truly protect our children. Think about it. It's a bizarre fact that in this country, our jewelry stores all over this country are more important than our children. Our banks, our airports, our NBA games, our NFL games, our office buildings, our movie stars, our politicians, they're all more protected than our children at school. Does that make any sense to anybody? Do we really love our money and our celebrities more than we love our children? Can we answer that question honestly? Any of us, can we answer that question honestly, knowing that we surround and protect so much with armed security while we drop our kids off at school that are so-called gun-free zones that are wide open targets for any crazy madman bent on evil to come there first? In every community in America, school districts, PTAs, teachers' unions, local law enforcement, moms and dads, they all must come together to implement the very best strategy to harden their schools, including effective, trained, armed security that will absolutely protect every innocent child in this country. And that has to happen now. Evil walks among us, and God help us if we don't harden our schools and protect our kids. The whole idea from some of our opponents that armed security makes us less safe is completely ridiculous. If that's true, and just think about this, if that's true, armed security makes us less safe, let's just go ahead and remove it from everywhere. Let's remove it from the White House, from Capitol Hill, and remove it from all of Hollywood. Any American school that needs immediate professional consultation and help with organizing and defining these solutions should call the National Rifle Association School Shield Program. And we will provide immediate assistance, and we will also provide it absolutely free to any school in America. I'll tell you this, that's more than anybody at the Democratic National Committee or NBC News or the Washington Post is offering. But you know what? The shameful politicization of tragedy, it's a classic tragedy right out of the playbook of a poisonous movement. In my 3 decades of leading the NRA, I've had the pleasure of working with a number of Democrats who believed America to be the greatest country in the world because of our free market capitalism and because of our individual liberties. But during the last decade, the Obama decade, many of those leaders have been forced out as a tidal wave of new European-style socialists seize control of the Democratic Party. Obama promised a fundamental transformation of our country. And you know what? It began with his own national party, a party that is now infested with saboteurs who don't believe in capitalism, don't believe in the Constitution, don't believe in our freedom, and don't believe in America as we know it. Obama may be gone, but their utopian dream, it marches on. And President Trump's election, while crucial, can't turn away the wave of these new European-style socialists bearing down upon us. I'm not just talking about Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's near the end of his career. But how about Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Bill de Blasio, Andrew Cuomo, Cory Booker, Christopher Murphy, and Keith Ellison? They are not Democrats in the mold of John F. Kennedy or Tip O'Neill. They hide behind labels like Democrat, left-wing, and progressive to make their socialist agenda more palatable. And that is terrifying. And that should terrify every citizen who values the American ideal in this country of individual liberty. They politicize the Department of Justice. They weaponize the Internal Revenue Service, the EPA, perhaps crippled the FBI and the intelligence community, and seized and embedded leadership in all of them to advance their agenda. Absolute control in every corner of our government is their ultimate dream. These intellectual elites, they think they're smarter than we are. They think they're smarter than the rest of us. And they think they're better than we are. They truly believe it, and you know it. The privileged and the powerful, they think they deserve to be in charge of every lever of power. But you know what? The United States Constitution makes it absolutely clear that they are not in charge. We, the people, are in charge of this country. But Washington, oh my gosh, this city, it likes to ignore that. Our intelligence community shrouds everything in secrecy, driving into darkness every dirty memo. and every dirty institutional secret and memory in the name of national security. But when the leaks come, as so often occurs in the light of day, it reveals nothing about the security of our country, and it reveals everything about the corruption of those in power. That's because in a captive society, the loss of transparency results in the loss of truth. They also eliminate internal resistance to wrongdoing in these great institutions. There is no stronger supporter of our law enforcement than the National Rifle Association. My gosh, we're one of the largest law enforcement organizations in the United States if you look at our membership. And we're proud of that. Everywhere I go, I get a police officer coming up to me, thanking me and saying, I'm a member of your organization. Keep up what you're doing. And there are tens of thousands of incredible men and women at the FBI. These are honorable, decent, hard-working people, and they're dedicated to keeping our country safe every single day. And we're proud of them, and we thank them. But as we've learned in recent months, even the FBI is not free of its own corruption and its own unethical agents. Look, and I know you probably all share this sentiment, and I get people telling me from coast to coast, and they kind of shake their heads when they say it to me. I can understand a few bad apples in an organization as large as the FBI, but what's hard to understand is why no one at the FBI stood up and called BS on its rogue leadership. I mean, really, where was the systemic resistance and repulsion that should protect every powerful institution that serves us? The lowest-ranking Marine knows to resist an unlawful order. The rank and file in every powerful institution must police its own leadership. But still, too much of today's Washington, no one speaks out. No one challenges authority. Everyone keeps their mouth closed and their heads down, and that's exactly how socialistic societies function. When leaders do whatever they want, when resistance and repercussion disappears, and when the fundamental concept of moral behavior is expunged, the state rules the day. And anyone who attempts to resist is smeared right into submission. Yep, you know it. Ah, yes, the art of the smear. We do live in the socialistic age of the art of the smear. Doesn't have to be true. It just has to stick somewhere, anywhere. It's designed to degrade, destroy, and it's all over the national media to serve their agenda. And socialism is a movement that loves the smear. Racist, misogynist, sexist, xenophobe, and more. These are the weapons and vitriol these character assassinations scream to permanently hang on their targets and create a growing segment of victims. Because socialism feeds off manipulated victims. You name the group, and they will find a way to turn them into victims. They keep their movement growing by finding someone to be offended by something every minute of every day. From the Occupy movement, to Black Lives Matter, to Antifa, they agitate the offended, promote uncivil discourse, and ignore any sense of due process and fairness to destroy their enemies. The elimination of due process is the very gold standard of the socialist state. Imagine this, and this happened and it's true. Imagine telling an elderly couple that because they sought help to do their taxes, that they could no longer exercise their fundamental Second Amendment right. That's exactly what Obama did. His administration proposed that some Social Security recipient who granted financial authority to a family member, friend, or financial professional was banned from purchasing a firearm. No questions asked, just like that. Good, law-abiding people were automatically and unjustly declared mentally incompetent and put on a new government list. And oh, how socialists love to make lists, especially lists that can be used to deny citizens their basic freedoms. And now some people are calling for a new list of anyone who has sought mental health care to deny them their Second Amendment rights. Look, and this is really important, and you never hear this on the national media. So I want to say it to all of you now, and I need your help in telling all of America this because it's the truth. The National Rifle Association originated the National Instant Check System. It was our bill. No one on the prohibited persons list should ever have access to a firearm. No killer, no felon, no drug dealer. And anyone adjudicated as mentally incompetent or a danger to society should be added to the check system and prevented from getting their hands on a gun. But watch what I released 3 years ago, and the media machine all over the country, they so callously and completely ignored it. Watch this.
Here's what the media won't tell you. The NRA has fought for 20 years to put the records of those adjudicated mentally incompetent into the National Instant Check System. And until the politicians demand that they are submitted, killers who are legally prohibited from owning firearms will walk into gun stores and pass every background check they take. So if they really wanted to make a difference, the media would lead every newscast with a reminder that the names of millions of violent felons, criminal gangbangers, and adjudicated mentally incompetent and dangerous people are missing from the background check system. But no one gets ratings by telling the truth about how to stop mass killers. So they don't report that 38 states submit less than 80% of their felony convictions to the system, leaving more than 7 million felony convictions in the dark. They don't tell you the truth. Instead, the only thing the average American has heard about background checks is the absolute fallacy that what we need is more. The system is only as good as the records within it, and the records only get submitted if the politicians demand it. What are the Oregon killer, the WDBJ killer, the Charleston church killer, the Santa Barbara killer, the Maryland Mall killer, the LA airport killer, the DC Navy Yard killer, the Aurora movie theater killer, the Tucson killer, the Virginia Tech killer, and both Fort Hood killers have in common: every single one of them passed a background check. If you cast a net and the fish swim through the holes, you don't need a bigger net, you need tighter holes. But when it comes to a background check system that's missing the names of millions of prohibited people, the politicians don't want to fix it. The best kept secret is that the National Instant Check System wouldn't exist at all if it weren't for the NRA. It's true. Back in the 90s, President Clinton forced passage of a mandatory waiting period on every handgun purchase in America. Not a background check, a wait. But NRA said as soon as the technology was available, their wait had to be replaced by an instant background check done by the dealer at the point of sale. NRA supported it, NRA got the votes, and NRA got it passed. We demanded an honest system that was supposed to make sure good people can purchase firearms as quickly as possible, a system that catches violent felons, the adjudicated mentally incompetent and dangerous, and every other prohibited person right at the point of sale, where they would be prosecuted for a federal felony. But they aren't. What has happened instead is one of the greatest failures in the history of American leadership. In 2010, roughly 80,000 prohibited people committed a felony by trying to buy a gun. Just 44 were prosecuted for it. Does that sound like a good number to anybody? So when you hear politicians who won't fix the broken system talk about expanding it, don't buy it. Demand what works. Put armed security in every school. Fix the broken mental health system. Enforce the federal gun laws against every criminal thug on the street. Prosecute dangerous people when they show up to buy a gun. And for God's sake, put every prohibited person into the system. That's what common sense gun laws look like.
Look, you know, the whole discussion of the Second Amendment and the gun issue in this country has become so dishonest in the national media and so dishonest among the politicians that you can barely stand it. That's not a new video, as I said. I've said for years, and I've been ignored by the same opportunists who don't give a damn. Yet you see them on TV every day whining away. Here's what I said on CBS way back in 1993. That was 25 years ago.
Let me ask you this. Are you in favor of computerizing the mental health records of people into a national computer bank?
You bet I am.
Well, can we join hands on that and go to Capitol Hill right now? Will you shake on it with me?
Now, here's the real tragedy. Charles Schumer shook my hand to get all the mental health records into the system, and then he went back to Capitol Hill, and you know what he did? Absolutely nothing. How many lives might have been saved if he had just kept his promise? They are liars to the core, and I'll make this prediction right now. A year from today, many of those records may still not be in the system, not if some of these whining for television politicians and their media enablers have their way. Instead, what they'll do is they'll keep coming after the NRA. And when another monster slips through the cracks, the very cracks that they've enabled in the system, as the records of prohibited persons remain out of the database, it'll happen again. But here's something we must be careful of as we go forward. We all have to be careful that this doesn't become a runaway train. What if all of your medical records, perhaps your conversations with your doctor, your prescription information, do we really want all that on a government list and in a government database? Here's another one. A military vet goes to his or her local VA, comes home, goes to his or her local VA, and tells the doctor they're having trouble sleeping at night. Or anyone who shares their nightmares with a medical professional. They all become potential triggers that somebody somewhere could define as a mental health barrier to owning a firearm. I even heard a television pundit recently suggesting that people seeking to buy a firearm should be interviewed first. I mean, interviewed first? Who's going to conduct that interview? And what will they ask? That's the challenge we as a free society face. How do we create a step along the way called due process that protects the innocent, law-abiding people of this country from being falsely accused, politically abused, and permanently stigmatized unjustly? Come on. Socialists oppose all of our most fundamental freedoms enshrined in the Bill of Rights. They don't like free speech any more than they like the Second Amendment. They like only limited speech, controlled by them through safe speech zones where they can shame the outspoken or riot to shut them up. If you still think we have full First Amendment freedom in this country, try going right now out to Berkeley and speaking out in favor of conservative causes or even the Second Amendment. This growing socialist state dreams of manipulating school children to squeeze and squeeze information about their parents. They'll be asking your kids if mommy and daddy spank them or what mommy and daddy feeds them for dinner. They'll want to know what TV shows you watch, what magazines, newspapers you read. And oh yes, do mommy and daddy own a gun? And all that private information will be entered into that ultimate list, that cloud of data storage that couldn't care less about due process and constitutional freedom and your privacy as an American citizen. And then it's just a short hop to the systematic destruction of our most basic freedoms in this country. And you all know what they are, but let me say them. Family, faith, individual responsibility, and self-destiny, a free market economy, patriotism, respect for our national flag and national anthem, personal liberty, and justice for all. Going back a decade or more, these essential freedoms and these essential values have been increasingly and sadly ridiculed and disrespected and diminished in this country. And it won't take long, if we stay on the path we're on, to erase them completely. That's the real consequence of this new socialist wave in America. You know, I hear a lot of quiet in this room, and I sense your anxiety. And you should be anxious, and you should be frightened. If they seize power, if these so-called European socialists take over the House and the Senate, and God forbid they get the White House again, our American freedoms could be lost and our country will be changed forever. And the first to go will be the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. History proves it. Every time, in every nation in which this political disease rises to power, its citizens are repressed, their freedoms are destroyed, and their firearms are banned and confiscated. And it's all backed in this country by the social engineering and the billions of people like George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, and more, and gleefully promoted by those who have risen to power in the so-called national news media and seized control of social media to spread their propaganda. They don't tell us news, and you all know it, and people know it all over the United States. They say it to me every day. They don't tell us news. They tell us what we need to think. That's the way it is these days. On college campuses, a Communist Manifesto is one of the most frequently assigned texts. Karl Marx is the most assigned economist. And there are now over 100 chapters of Young Democratic Socialists of America at many universities, and students are even earning academic credit for promoting socialist causes. In too many classrooms all over the United States, and I know you think about this when you decide where you're going to send your kids to school, and your kids think about it too. The United States Constitution is ignored, United States history is perverted, and the Second Amendment, freedom in this country, is despised. You know, some people out there think the NRA should just stick to its Second Amendment agenda. and not talk about all of our freedoms. But real freedom requires protection of all of our rights. And a Second Amendment isn't worth its own words in a country where all of our other individual freedoms are destroyed. So I promise you this: the NRA will not only speak out, we will speak out louder and we will speak out stronger than ever before. We will do it through NRA TV and our media operations, which will expand to reach a growing audience of Americans that are looking all over this country for the truth. They're going to do it with strong voices like Dana Lass that you've just seen, Dan Bongino, and others who are engaging in new programming to make our message just as accessible as NBC, the New York Times, and the rest of the so-called national news media. Let's be clear. We are never talking about an armed resistance against the socialist corruption of our government. We are always talking about a resistance armed with the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights in our country. The genius of those documents, the brilliance of America, of our country itself, is that all of our freedoms in this country are for every single citizen. And there is no greater personal individual freedom than the right to keep and bear arms, the right to protect yourself, and the right to survive. It's not bestowed by man, but granted by God to all Americans as our American birthright. So I call right now today on every citizen who loves this country and who treasures this freedom to stand and unflinchingly defend the Second Amendment, the one freedom that protects us all in this country. And I refuse to leave the stage until I say one more time that we must immediately harden our schools. Every day, young children are being dropped off at schools that are virtually wide open, soft targets for anyone bent on mass murder. It should not be easier for a madman to shoot up a school than a bank or a jewelry store or some Hollywood gala. Schools must be the most hardened targets in this country, and evil must be confronted immediately with all necessary force to protect our kids. I said 5 years ago, after that horrible tragedy in Newtown, and I wish, oh God, I wish more had heeded my words. So lean in, listen to me now, and never forget these words. To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
1, 2, check 1, 2, 3, 4, check, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, check, 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 1, 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome ACU Chairman Matt Schlapp.
Hello, everyone. Is that not a beautiful stage? You know what those buildings are, right? See the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court? We all know what's at stake. And as you think through all the things we're dealing with as a country and in society, we realize how important it is and how lucky those of us are who have a life partner to take the journey with. As a country, we're so fortunate to have a woman of humility and deep faith taking this interesting journey along with our Vice President. We often say about Vice President Pence that he has this stellar conservative record in Congress, as the governor of Pennsylvania, now your Vice President. Do you know what his Come on, we got some Hoosiers out here. All right, that's good. Do you know what his lifetime rating was with the American Conservative Union? It was 98%. 98%. And I've come to realize one of the reasons why his votes in Congress were so solid for our conservative values. I think he didn't want to go home and tell his wife if he cast a bad vote. We're so fortunate to have Karen Pence, along with her husband, over there in the White House, making a difference. She believes in supporting the rights of the unborn. She believes in helping our military families and spouses. She's been a teacher, she's a mom, but more importantly, she respects all of you, and she's our friend. Please give a warm Cpac welcome to the Second Lady of the United States, Karen Pence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Cpac, for that warm, warm welcome. What an honor to be able to address you today, and what a treat to introduce my husband. And I do want to introduce him today. I want to introduce you to a different side of Mike Pence that you may not know. For years, people in Indiana heard his conservative commentary on his radio show. We called him Rush Limbaugh on decaf. And then for 12 years, on the floor of the United States Congress, he fought for conservative principles. Yeah. Next, he governed as a conservative governor in our home state of Indiana. And today, he will speak to you as Vice President. But that Mike Pence you already know. I'd like to take this opportunity to pull back the curtain and show you the Mike Pence that I know. I'd like you to see this man that I've been married to for 32 years. A man, thank you. A man who has supported me as a teacher. He actually would come to my back-to-school nights. He also supported me as a stay-at-home mom when I wanted to be home. Yeah. And I used to do these watercolor fairs, and he would come to my booth and help sell the watercolors. And now he firmly supports my initiative of art therapy. But I want you to see a little more about him. So here we go. 5 facts you need to know about Mike Pence. Don't you love those? Number 1, if it's Friday night, we better be having pizza for dinner, supreme thin crust with an O'Doul's. Every Friday night. Number 2, now this is a good one for you to hear about. The feedback that he respects the most comes from his 3 kids, all 3 of them. We raised them to be independent thinkers, to climb their own mountains, to not be afraid to speak up and disagree with us. So he knows their comments are honest and sometimes hard-hitting, and their praise is sincere. He values their opinions above all, even above mine, because my job, as we all know, is to keep him humble. So I don't always give him all this positive feedback. Number 3, you may not know this about him. Mike Pence is a cartoon artist. I know, got you, didn't I? In law school, he drew the weekly cartoon for the law school paper. It was called Law School Daze, D-A-Z-E. And Daze was the main character, a law student, fashioned after yours truly, Mike Pence. So for his law school graduation present, I took all of the cartoons and I put them in a book. So we have a book now of all of his cartoons. And when I was teaching 2nd grade, we used to have my students over for dinner in small groups, and he would draw a caricature of each one of them before they left that evening. Number 4, what would Mike Pence buy if he could buy anything? A horse. He has always wanted a horse. And I think riding horses is really the only place he truly relaxes. And number 5, he loves a good book, especially the good book. He is a voracious reader, from historical novels to biographies to mysteries to Christian books to political commentaries. He loves a good book. So thank you for letting me introduce my husband, Vice President Mike Pence.
Well, hello, Cpac. And thank you to my wonderful wife, Karen. Isn't she something? A teacher, an artist, a Marine Corps mom, and the Second Lady of the United States. Would you give Karen one more round of applause for all that she does for the cause and the country? And it is great to be back at Cpac 2018, the largest gathering of conservatives in America every single year. Thank you all for being here. And before I begin and talk about the progress we've made, allow me to take a moment to address what I know is on all of our hearts this morning. The terrible attack that claimed the lives of 17 Americans and injured more last week in Parkland, Florida. In America, we mourn with those who mourn and grieve with those who grieve. And yesterday, President Trump and I met with the family of Meadow Pollack and other students and families reeling from the attack in Parkland. We also met in the White House with families from other communities who've experienced the same violence firsthand. And as the President said, we'll never forget it. We prayed with them. We listened to them as they poured out their hearts. As the President has said, no child, no teacher should ever be in danger in an American school. Earlier this week, President Trump called on Congress to strengthen background checks, and 2 days ago he directed the Department of Justice to expedite the regulation of bump stocks. Later this week, when the President meets with the nation's governors in our nation's capital, we'll make the safety of our nation's schools and our students our top national priority. I can assure you all of this. President Trump and our entire administration will continue to take strong action to make our schools safe and to give law enforcement and our families the tools they need to deal with those struggling with dangerous mental illness. So as we move forward, we'll continue to work, and we'll continue with all of you to pray for God's grace and comfort for all the families impacted by this terrible attack. And we'll pray for God's wisdom, that all of us in positions of authority might find a way to come together with American solutions to confront and end this evil in our time. So thank you. It is great to be back at Cpac. I stand here today with profound gratitude to say that because of all of you, because of the conservative majorities in Congress that you helped elect, and because of the strong leadership of the President you put in the White House, 2017 was the most consequential year in the history of the conservative movement. It's true. And tomorrow, you'll hear firsthand from the man who galvanized that movement. You know, I spoke to him on the phone this morning, and I can tell you he can't wait to get here. The man who won a historic election, the man who's been delivering on the promises that he made every day since, the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump. You know, I'm here because I stand with President Trump. I'm here because we stand with the conservative movement. And come to think of it, we always stand for our flag and our national anthem as well. But what a year. You know, when President Trump addressed you last February, he declared in his words that our victory was a victory and a win for conservative values. And so it was. And now he and I are both back here at Cpac this week to thank you for everything you've done to advance our cause. Because of your support in this past year, it's been a year of action. It's been a year of remarkable results. In a word, it's been a year of promises made and promises kept. I mean, think about it. President Trump promised to rebuild our military and restore the arsenal of democracy, and in just a few weeks, he'll sign the largest investment in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. He promised to stand without apology for the men and women of law enforcement, and today we're once again giving those peace officers the respect and the resources they deserve all across America. President Trump promised to enforce our laws, secure our borders, and today illegal crossings at our southern border have been cut nearly in half, and make no mistake about it, we're going to build that wall. He promised to appoint strong conservatives to the federal courts at every level, and President Trump came through. He appointed Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court and set a record for the most circuit court judges appointed in the first year of any administration in history. And President Donald Trump promised to stand for the unalienable right to life. And from the first day of this administration, he reinstated the Mexico City policy, and I was honored to cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate to send a bill to the president's desk to allow states to defund Planned Parenthood. On the economy, we've unleashed American energy, approved the Keystone and Dakota pipelines, and President Trump put America first when he withdrew the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. And we've been busy rolling back the heavy hand of government as well. This president has actually repealed 22 regulations for every new federal rule put on the books. And finally, President Trump promised to cut taxes across the board for working families and job creators. And 2 months ago today, President Trump signed the largest tax cuts and tax reform in American history. Promises made, promises kept. And on the world stage, we've also been restoring strong American leadership. And under President Donald Trump, America once again stands without apology as leader of the free world. Our NATO allies are contributing more to our common defense than ever before, and for decades. After one president after another promised to move the U.S. Embassy to the capital of our most cherished ally, President Trump made history on December 6 when the United States of America recognized Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. So we've stood with our allies, and we've stood up to our enemies. And nowhere is that more true than in the fight against radical Islamic terror. Under this commander-in-chief, we've taken the fight to the terrorists on our terms, on their soil. Thanks to the courage of our armed forces and the leadership of this commander-in-chief, ISIS is on the run, their caliphate has crumbled, and we will not rest or relent until we destroy ISIS at its source, so it can no longer threaten our nation, our allies, or our way of life. And we put the leading state sponsor of terror on notice as well. The United States will no longer tolerate Iran's destabilizing activities across the region, and this country will no longer certify the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. And in the wake of provocations and threats against the United States and our allies, we've made it clear to North Korea that the era of strategic patience is over. Two weeks ago, I was honored to lead the official delegation to the opening ceremonies of the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, where we cheered on Team USA. But as you all know, many in the mainstream media seem quite taken with another dignitary. You know, for all the media fawning over the sister of the North Korean dictator, I think it's important that every American knows who this person is and what she's done. The sister of Kim Jong-un is a central pillar of the most tyrannical and oppressive regime on the planet. An evil family clique that brutalizes, subjugates, starves, and imprisons its 25 million people. Even the United Nations reported that, in their words, the gravity, scale, and nature of these violations reveal a state that does not have a parallel in the contemporary world. That's why the United States government has sanctioned her for her role in abetting North Korea's horrendous human rights abuses and crimes against humanity. People are routinely jailed and executed for the most minor acts of defiance. And every American remembers the heartbreaking story of Otto Warmbier. So for all those in the media who think I should have stood and cheered with the North Koreans, I say, the United States of America doesn't stand with murderous dictatorships. We stand up to murderous dictatorships. And we will keep standing strong until North Korea stops threatening our country, our allies, or until they abandon their nuclear and ballistic missiles once and for all. So in this White House, it's about strength. It's about growth for our nation. And it's working. America is more secure, and our economy is booming. You know, since Election Day 2016, businesses large and small have created more than 2.5 million new jobs across this country. Unemployment hasn't been this low in 17 years, and more Americans are working today than ever before in American history. After 8 years of a stagnant economy and wages that wouldn't budge, American workers are seeing their paychecks rise faster today than at any point in nearly a decade. And more than 1.5 million Americans have left the rolls of food stamps and now are able to support and sustain themselves with dignity and self-worth. But I know in my heart that the best is yet to come, because as we speak, our economy has already started to feel the effects of that historic tax cut. About 90% of working Americans are going to get a tax cut. Millions are already seeing more money in their paychecks and feeling it in their wallets. And we didn't just cut taxes on your income. The Obamacare individual mandate tax is gone. You know, since the president's tax cuts became the law of the land, businesses large and small have actually announced more than $480 billion in new investments in American jobs, American workers, and in just the past 2 months, more than 4.3 million Americans have already gotten a raise or a bonus, and we're just getting started. Folks, that's great news. That's great news. But not everybody thinks it's that big of a deal. I don't know if you heard, but the woman that wants to be Speaker of the House again, Nancy Pelosi, said, she actually said the tax cuts would be Armageddon before they passed. But just a few days ago, she said it was unpatriotic to let the American people keep more of what they earn. But most amazingly of all, she keeps saying that a $1,000 bonus for working Americans is nothing more than crumbs. Well, let me remind all of you, I come from the Joseph A. Bank wing of the West Wing of the White House. Okay. All right. I mean, seriously, folks, when our kids were little, we had a term for another $1,000 in our paycheck at the end of the year. Christmas. You with me? I mean, these bonuses have meant real money. They've helped working families all across this country with pay raises that are generating opportunities even as we speak. And I want to say from my heart, any leader who says that $1,000 in the pockets of working families is crumbs is out of touch with the American people. You know, it would be a disaster for our cause if Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House again. But we're not going to let it happen. But this movement should know it's a very real threat, because the other side knows exactly what's at stake between now and the end of this year. The far left has watched with dismay as we've dismantled the liberal legacy of the last administration and turned this country around. And they're doing everything they can to try and win back the Congress next November. I mean, we don't have to wonder what would happen if the party of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer won the House and the Senate this November, do we? I mean, remember the last time it happened? I do. I was actually there the last time Democrats ran the Congress, and they nearly ran America into the ground. They raised taxes, they cut the military, they tried to pass cap and trade, they gave us Dodd-Frank and the Obamacare nightmare. I mean, they thought they could borrow, spend, and bail their way back to a growing America. In the past few years, Democrats have only fallen further to the left. Their platform, as we all know, can be summed up in one word: resist. Resist our policies, resist our president, and resist the results that you and I and our entire movement have fought so hard to achieve. So it's up to us to stand up to them and stand up for the American people and the progress that we've made. But the other side is motivated. They're mobilized. So today, to the men and women of this conservative movement, I want to admonish you. Let this be the day that we, as a movement, decided to deliver another victory for the American people in 2018. I mean, we threw out the playbook in 2016, and we're going to throw it out in 2018. If all of us do all that we can from this day forward, I know we'll continue to achieve historic victories for our movement and for America. You know, the choices that we make in the days ahead, the promises that we make to one another, and the actions we take will shape our nation for generations to come. So today, on behalf of President Trump and our entire administration, I'm asking every member of this movement to go back home to your communities, to your workplaces. Talk to your families, your friends, and your neighbors. Tell them what they don't hear in the media about everything that we've accomplished. Tell them how the policies the president's advanced are making a difference in the lives of American families and enterprises and in the life of our nation. Tell them we've cut their taxes and put more money in their pockets. Tell them we're restoring American strength at home and abroad so their families can sleep safe at night. And tell them that thanks to our administration, confidence is back. Jobs are coming back. Just tell them America is back. And as we prepare for the challenges ahead, let's remember, progress is driven by the people who show up. Your president and I need you to show up. Defend all that we've accomplished and all that we have yet to do. We can't turn back, men and women. We can't give anything less than everything. America's counting on us. But I know in my heart that we'll come through. And you'll come through for this country once again. I've seen the courage and conviction that defines the men and women of the conservative movement all my life. And I see it in your faces this morning. I mean, my friends, the truth is we live in a time of widening challenges and unknowable threats. A time of too much division and too much anger in America. You know, it seems like we're becoming more and more disconnected from each other. Too often unable or unwilling to meet our fellow citizens where they are, to do what the president did yesterday, just to listen to one another in a spirit of humility and respect. And increasingly, it seems like we've lost sight. We've lost sight of who we are as a people, that the truth is, here in the United States of America, it's true today and it's always been true, that there will always be more that unites us than will ever divide the good and great people of this country. So let's try to reconnect in the days and the debates that come ahead. Reconnect with one another, reconnect with our communities. And lastly, I also believe that we should also seek in these challenging times to reconnect to something deeper. Something that speaks to the very heart of who we are. Someone who I believe has always been the source of our strength, and more than that, our hope. You know, yesterday mourned the passing of one of the greatest Americans of the past century, the Reverend Billy Graham. We remembered his ministry, a ministry for the gospel that changed the lives of millions. And we remember his matchless voice that inspired our nation during some of our darkest times. I remembered one such time just yesterday. His words at the National Cathedral 17 years ago. Words spoken just 3 days after the worst attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. I was there as a first-term member of Congress, and I'll never forget what he said. On that day, Billy Graham said to the American people, "The spirit of this nation will not be defeated." But he admonished Americans to, in his words, come together to confess our need for God. He said, "We've always needed God from the beginning of this nation, but today we need him especially." And he reminded us that the Bible says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. And so with that admonition in my heart, I close today with faith. Faith in the boundless capacity of the American people. Faith in the president and the leaders they've elected to represent them at every level. and with that other kind of faith. What Billy Graham called hope for the present and hope for the future. That in the days ahead, as we work to advance our cause, restore our country, let us also remember to claim that hope, remembering those ancient words that if his people, who are called by his name, will humble themselves and pray, he'll hear from heaven and he'll heal this land, this one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So to this conservative movement, I say today, we've accomplished much in a little more than a year, but we've got a lot more to do. With the renewed commitment of this rising generation, with the support of strong conservative majorities in the Congress, with President Donald Trump in the White House, and with God's help, I know we will make America safe again. We will make America prosperous again. And to borrow a phrase, we will make America great again. Thank you very much. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.
Everybody, raise your glasses to the senator.
To Ted Kennedy.
In the White House in '72.
We're family. There's no more important word. We share a lifetime bond. We have a situation here on Chappaquiddick.
There's been an accident. We can't find Mary Jo.
What the hell happened last night? I was driving.
Do you have any idea? Court of public opinion will have your head on a stake.
We tell the truth, or at least our version of it.
I want you to know that every effort possible was made to save her.
What do we do to help the senator?
A dead body holds a lot of secrets. Those can be the difference between guilt and innocence.
Are you saying that there's a possibility that maybe she didn't drown? I could have had her out of that car in 25 minutes if I got the call. But no one called. Sometimes the path you're on isn't always the path you choose.
What's stopping you from making that choice yourself?
I can't watch you do this, Ted. You what, Joe? Self-destruct.
Oh my God, what have I done?
We're not afraid of the IRS. Judicial Watch is fighting the IRS right now in federal court to hold it accountable to the rule of law over its illegal targeting of Americans for their political beliefs. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. We need to follow the rule of law on immigration. Judicial Watch is in court against politicians who want to break the rules to protect illegal aliens. We want to protect the rule of law, and we want to protect you. Follow us on YouTube now. We haven't forgotten Hillary Clinton. Judicial Watch exposed the Clinton email scandal, and we're in court right now holding her accountable to the same laws and rules the rest of us are expected to follow. Follow us on Facebook.
We are coming together at a crucial time in our nation's history. America is making great strides towards freedom and liberty, but she also confronts determined foes and faces enormous challenges. Challenges that strike directly at the core principles that all of us here hold so dear. Free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional values, and national security. Across America and the world, we see where liberalism has left its devastating mark. In homes, in schools, in communities, and in capitals. That's why our work is so important, and it's what the Heritage Foundation is all about. At Heritage, we're not just a bulwark against the left, we're a battleship for liberty. We are determined to guide America to renewed greatness and to take the fight to liberalism. That's why I'm so proud to serve as the Heritage Foundation's president, and why I'm so honored to join with you here at Cpac in the fight for the greatest nation on earth.
The American inventor, protected by the United States patent, an exclusive right to one's ideas, inventions, and intellectual property. From inspiration to innovation, America led the world. Until now.
Today I'm burning my patent along with my colleagues.
The patent right is just a broken promise. It's a useless piece of paper.
U.S. patent protection strength is under attack. Our leadership position in the world has dropped from 1st to 12th place.
The attack on the patent system is an attack on the American dream.
You can be anything except an inventor.
That idea is being taken away from us now, an essential right.
It's in the base Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, protecting the rights of inventors.
Investors no longer trust our patent system. Big tech companies are lobbying to make it easier to steal.
When they steal it, you can't do anything about it.
It's cheaper for them to steal your idea than develop it themselves.
The administrative state is overriding our constitutional court system and invalidating patents at an alarming rate.
Congress created an out-of-control administrative tribunal.
Inventors and leading experts are speaking out in a new film on why our weakening patent system is destroying American innovation.
To take that away is to destroy liberty, not just for the inventor, but for you and me as well.
Unprotected. The shredding of the United States patent system.
If our patent system dies, our country dies.
You can be told to run, or you can choose to run. Both get you moving, yet one just goes through the motion. The other has purpose, meaning, freedom. What about your health care? Are you being told, going through the motion? Or are you choosing something better? Liberty Health Share has a purpose. It unites people to share in the burden of healthcare. A true community that cares for you in your time of need. Free from interference and constraints that gives you back the power of freedom. It's time to exercise your purpose. Time to exercise your meaning. It's time to exercise your freedom. Liberty Health Share.
The American steel industry decimated by cheap steel from China. American shipbuilding wiped out by subsidized companies in Asia. Now the U.S. airline industry is under threat. Middle East carriers are getting tens of billions in illegal government subsidies, violating our trade agreements and putting 1.2 million jobs at risk. Entire industries wiped out. It's happened before. It can happen again. Thank you, President Trump. U.S. airline workers are counting on you.
Live from the Cpac stage, the John Batchelor Radio Show, featuring a conversation on the surprising strength of the GOP in 2018. Please welcome today's guests, Liz Peek, Fox News; Thaddeus McCotter, Freedom Asylum; Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Fox News; and the host of the John Batchelor Show, John Batchelor.
Delightful.
I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show at Cpac, the American Conservative Union in Washington, D.C., on the border with Maryland. Actually, I'm a little lost, so I'm very pleased to welcome my guests who know exactly where I am. Liz Peek of Fox News, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, and Sebastian Gorka of Fox News. Our topic is the strength of the Republican Party here at the beginning of 2018, a midterm election year, always keen on measuring ourselves. So we begin, Liz, with the economy. In these last days, we've had polls showing that the American people, despite the efforts of the quarrelsome crowd, now enjoy the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed in 2017. That significant fact joins with the observation from all metrics, quite independent, that the markets have turned positive, very positive, on the future of the United States, Wall Street and Main Street. What supports this being sustained, Liz? What is the significance to you, and how do you connect that to the Republican Party? Good evening.
Good evening, John. Thank you. I think the most telling poll that's come out is that now 51% of the country actually approves of a tax cut that cuts taxes for 85% of the country. The most amazing thing the Democrats have accomplished in the last year is convincing most Americans that they were not going to see their taxes go down and that this is a bill that they should hate. It's really a remarkable accomplishment in terms of messaging, but now Americans are beginning to warm up to this. And in addition, we have a booming economy. So this is feeding that economy, as is the lightening of regulation that has been put in place by the White House. So we have two very formidable add-ons to an already growing economy. Now the growth rate this year is expected to be anywhere from 3 to 3.5%. The economists I follow most closely on Wall Street are now talking 3.5%. And that looks sustainable because for the first time in 8 years, we have businesses investing in America. And I think that is something that is incredibly formative for the next couple of years. Productivity has been flat almost over the last decade. Under Obama, businesses were so worried about increased regulation, higher taxes, uncertainty on all fronts, that no one spent money on capital goods, so you didn't see any increase in productivity. So we have sort of a virtuous circle here. Enormous confidence. The latest reading from small business owners, a record high level of confidence in the economy. Best time ever to invest, they responded to a survey. These are remarkable readings of the economy, and I think the GOP, the reason that their polling is getting better and Trump's polling is getting better is partly because people are increasingly comfortable and optimistic about the economy.
Thaddeus, your state of Michigan is one of the 3 states that surprised the world in the election of November 2016. Do you see it on Main Street? Do you see it in Detroit, the improving economy?
Well, we see an improving economy, but the fundamental reason that people start to like the tax bill is because they understand that happiness begins around the hearth of home. What the Republican Party did, what President Trump did, was by allowing people to keep their own money, by allowing them to make their own decisions, to make their own investments, by allowing businesses to invest in their most precious resource, which is their people, their human employees, has allowed this economy to grow and to continue to grow. And it shows that the suffocating bureaucracy which the Democrats want to put on top of American prosperity can be removed, can be shattered, and can unleash a tsunami of economic prosperity started with and driven by the American people. I use driven because it's a Detroit car reference.
Yeah, so very nice. Now, Macomb County is especially critical to the success of the president in 2016. Macomb County in particular, you know it very well. Does it see an increase in jobs? Does it see a stronger economy?
We always see it. We get sicker quicker. We get better later because we're a manufacturing state. But when you look at it, Michigan's happy when it's making things, when it's being productive. And don't forget that the president's position on getting American manufacturing jobs back in Michigan is something that resonates not only in Michigan but throughout the Midwest, and also helps to undergird their confidence in this economic recovery. Isn't simply Wall Street making money, isn't simply the Dow Jones, it is people being put back to work to make things, to continue to make America great again, and to sell a few cars in Detroit.
Seb, I'm calling upon you to help us understand how Washington doesn't get this. You're here all the time. You have observed this from the White House and now from Fox News. What Thaddeus is saying and what Liz is reporting from New York is common sense to us. We see it all the time. Is Washington deaf? Why isn't that message getting through to Capitol Hill and to the lobbyists here?
Well, there's two audiences in Washington, I think, that apply to that question. There's the GOP establishment audience, and then there's the DNC and the Democrats. The GOP is starting to understand that this president was only accidentally the GOP candidate. He was the rank outsider, he owed nothing to the swamp, and they're starting to understand that he won despite the right-wing establishment, not because of it, and they're riding his coattails, and I think that's going to be, the effect in November. For the Democrats, John, I have no answer for you, because Make America Great Again is a great slogan to win an election. Right. Now it's actually being unpacked, and Thaddeus has unpacked some of it, as has Liz. What does it mean? I tell everybody who asks me, what's the president really like? And I say, very easy. The president wants all Americans to be safe and to prosper, whether or not you voted for him. I mean, this is the man. Whether you voted for Hillary, whether you wanted Bernie to be the candidate, it's irrelevant to him. So it's safety and prosperity, which, funnily enough, is a rather conservative concept, isn't it, John? We've heard that before.
Yes, we
popular
have
too.
Yes, rather popular. What are you going to argue against as the DNC? We don't want to be safe and we don't want prosperity, because that's what they've blocked themselves into a corner in the last year with.
Liz, secular stagnation. Where did it go? Larry Summers was just here preaching secular stagnation. He convinced the street. He convinced the major voices in New York that we were only going to grow at 2% forever, and that the idea of 3% and 4% was a fairy tale. What happened?
Well, he's still out there writing op-eds about how we can only grow at 2%, even though we are actually growing at 3%. And the thinking is that there's a limited amount of labor available. But again, that ties into this whole productivity issue. Labor supply is not going to be a problem, is not going to lead to booming wages, although wages are starting to climb, which, by the way, was something Trump wanted to see happen and the country wanted to see happen. But the issue, again, is productivity. If you don't invest in new plants and new equipment, automated this and so forth, artificial intelligence, you are not going to see a climbing productivity number, and indeed then labor becomes a constraint. But I think they're looking back over their shoulder and saying, here's why we failed to grow the economy. And we want this failure to be understood as something that now cannot be reversed. It is being reversed, and I think it's really the greatest thing that this Republican administration has going for it.
Thaddeus, you're a recovering politician, so I ask you to help us understand how this message is being heard by your colleagues on the Hill, especially the Republicans. Mr. Ryan and the leadership certainly passed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, but there's always hesitation. The Republicans aren't happy with good news. Are they hearing this good news? Or are they regretful of what they've done?
No, I don't think they regret it. I don't think they do. But what you have to understand is when people are out there getting employed, they're working, they're doing things, they don't have time to go to town halls and throw chairs at you or curse the president. As a recovering politician, I got a lot of time to do that myself, although I like the president. So what you have to do is, especially to the people here tonight, or the people who listen to the show, is make sure your members know that you appreciate what they're doing. Make sure they see that the efforts that you've put in to stand up to the left, to stand up to Crumbs Pelosi, to do the right thing for the American people, that you're appreciative of it and you're working on it and you want to see them go back. Because as Seb has pointed out, as Liz points out, what do the Democrats have? What do the Democrats have economically as a policy, not a talking point, but as a policy to go beyond 3% growth, to go beyond that 2% that the clowns talk about in the New York Times, the underestimation of the American entrepreneur? What are they going to offer you to make things better than they already are? Republicans are already working on plans to make it even better. What do they got? Nothing to spare.
Remember, Hillary even came out against the gig economy, so to speak. So talk about a line that fell flat with millennials. I mean, the millennial generation is all about these sort of startup ventures, et cetera, a lot of them being gig economy. That was, I think, one of the worst moves she made during her entire campaign. It's a long list.
This is the John Batchelor Show. We're at the American Conservative Union Cpac 2018. And we're speaking of the strength of the Republican Party. Seb has already pointed to where we're going. It's peace and prosperity. The next conversation is about ISIS. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I am at the American Conservative Union Cpac 2018. Quite irregularly, I'm doing this radio show on stage, but I'm dealing with people we're very happy and comfortable with all the time to measure the strength of the Republican Party. Thaddeus McCotter, Liz Peek, and Sebastian Gorka. Seb, peace and prosperity. That's what re-elected Ike in 1956. It's what makes the Republican Party strong in the second part of the 20th century, because they spent the first half of the 20th century dealing with the New Deal. But in the second half, peace and prosperity. Seb, this is a hard question. I've been looking for days. Where's ISIS? What happened? How did it go away?
It's not on the agenda. Nobody's talking about it. Isn't it remarkable? Especially if we recall that for the longest time, the last president told us this is a generational threat, meaning your children, our grandchildren will be fighting the ISIS jihadis decades from now. And what happened? We have a new president who seems to have compressed a generation down into 6 months. So why is that? And here I must give credit where credit is due. Number one, the president trusts our military and allows them to do their job, which is a refreshing concept after the last 8 years. Secondly, we have the best military in the world. So when you let them do their job, they will crush our enemies. But lastly, and here, credit is due. Steve Bannon, as the president's chief strategist, I was the strategist, he was the chief strategist, said, I want a bumper sticker for the next 3 months, and it's going to be no more physical caliphate. The physical caliphate, which is what makes ISIS remarkable, because they're the first jihadi group since the last caliphate was dissolved to reestablish one. We have to obliterate it. What did the president and the American armed forces do? In a matter of 3 months, took back Raqqa, Mosul, and destroyed ISIS's physical caliphate. That's why we're not talking about them, and that's why we're safer, with one caveat. They don't disappear. They're looking for more fertile grounds elsewhere, probably Africa, but we'll deal with them there as well. So leadership brings results. It's that simple, John.
Liz, the national security question also deals with our allies in Europe, our reluctant allies in Europe, and NATO's geriatric state, until along came President Trump. We don't feel it in New York. We can't sense in New York whether NATO's paying attention or not. But the metrics demonstrate that the U.S. is putting pressure on NATO to respond and putting pressure on its countries to respond. I think, Liz and I are in New York all the time. I think often, Liz, the fact that we don't talk about it means that it's going better.
Maybe. Look, I think that President Trump had a very realistic and common sense approach to our relationship with NATO, which is we all need to do our fair share. The fair share, words are pretty popular on the left until it came to this particular discussion. But it seems to me, for example, when President Trump came out and at some length berated our NATO allies for not living up to their agreement to spend 2% of GDP on armaments and on defense, I thought he was totally reasonable. And I think most Americans feel like, yes, we are shouldering too much of the responsibility here. I just looked at these numbers very recently. Germany, which has a huge trade surplus, is incredibly wealthy country, is still not paying 2% on their own defense. And I think, you know, most people are sort of thinking, why should that be? So, you know, one of the things that the left was so alarmed about was that Trump was going to pull us out of the NATO agreement. I don't think that's anywhere on the horizon, but I think he does expect our allies to basically live up to their agreements.
Thaddeus, Moscow and Beijing are threats to the American people. Do the American people know it?
Well, I think the American people know it. It's whether or not the American cognoscenti in foreign policy understand it. Look, just as it was at the beginning of the 20th century, it is today. You have America and her allies believe that liberty undergirds security and prosperity. As rival models of governance, Putin's autocratic kleptocracy in Russia and the communist Beijing regime believe that liberty is the enemy of prosperity and security. Therefore, the race is between the United States and her allies and communist and authoritarian countries for the future of other countries that are developing to see which way to go. And in that, President Trump understands, by making America great again, that is not just simply a self-indulgent project of the American people. What it is it unleashes liberty, puts it on display, and we show the world what a free people can achieve and inspire them to get on board as our allies and show that the future belongs to free people.
The Indo-Pacific region is the challenge of the 21st century. The president has led an initiative to create something we can call a coalition. It's called a Quad: India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. Seb, I want to come to you on this specifically. That creation is entirely a product of the Trump administration. That did not exist. The previous administration had a, what you'd have to say, unknown relationship with China, unknown. Did not see it as a threat, hence we lost major pieces of the South China Sea to China's aggression. This administration sees it. Are we going to stand up for ourselves, Seb?
Absolutely. The fact the president launched a 302 investigation against the trade practices of China is a historic act. And they always say that candidates don't really realize the enormity of what they're getting into until that first day after the inauguration and they get the full presidential daily brief. I can assure you, and this was for me also a personal falling off the scales from my eyes, the president's attitude to China changed as soon as he became the president, because he had a very businessman-like attitude. Well, their money's green, so their investment must be good for America. He now understands, thanks to those briefings, that there's only one strategic threat America faces. It's not ISIS. ISIS is not a strategic threat, nor is North Korea, nor is Russia. Russia's GDP is smaller than California's. They're losing 500,000 people per year are dying in Russia more than are being born. These aren't strategic level threats. The only one we face is China. China is at war with us already, not with battle carrier groups, but with its economic warfare, its political warfare. Look at what Australia has gone through with literally the purchasing of politicians with Chinese cash to distort their democracy. These are facts. So the president has turned the world around, not only American understanding inside the administration, but our friends in that Asia-Pacific region realize American leadership is back. We're not going to go to war with China kinetically, but we're not going to allow them to execute their one belt, one road plan for hegemonic domination. Not going to happen under Donald Trump's watch.
This is the John Batchelor Show. We're at the American Conservative Union, Cpac 2018. We're discussing the strength of the Republican Party in 2018. It is not something you see in the headlines of the Washington Post or the New York Times, nor is it what you hear on the national networks. It is true, however, that the strength of the Republican Party depends upon dealing with a current event that is non-transparent, that is generally understood as Russiagate, and we'll turn to that when we come back. I'm John Batchelor with Thaddeus McCotter, Liz Peek, and Sebastian Gorka. This is the John Batchelor Show. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show at the American Conservative Union, Cpac 2018. We're discussing the strength of the Republican Party, and we've talked of the economy and the tax cut and the growth that was denied by the previous administration. We've talked of prosperity. ISIS has disappeared from the conversation. Russia and China are challenged directly No longer is there diplomacy around the edges as if we can get along. We cannot get along with tyrannies. However, there is a subject that comes up all the time, and I want to deal with it here. It's called Russiagate in general. My opinion, it is a product of an allegation by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC to accuse a candidate for the presidency, a president-elect, and a president of colluding with our enemies. Colluding for money, colluding because of blackmail. It is a fantastic and false accusation based upon rubbish called the Steele dossier. And yet, we have today a special counsel doing his business as if he's going to discover the secret door to this conspiracy. I want to begin with you, Liz, because you and I talk about this now and again and the frustration of us watching it from New York. Your opinion, is this a Washington matter that only Washington people can understand? Because it makes no sense to us in New York, week after week, the idea that in some fashion there's going to be a revelation that tears Donald Trump from the presidency and restores the kingdom.
Well, by the way, I think the rest of the country is wondering what the heck is going on, because this investigation has been going on for almost a year. And there is absolutely no evidence that anyone in the Trump campaign or administration colluded with Russia in any way. And so I think it is not only, frankly, Americans' attention span is such that people have really tuned out of this. Now, unfortunately, what's happening, and I think this is a tragedy, is our FBI, our law enforcement administration, and the Justice Department are under a serious cloud, because it really does look like, yes, there was collusion. The collusion was between Democrats running for office and the FBI. And that, to me, is an absolutely horrible revelation, and I think that's where we're going with this whole investigation of how this warrant was obtained by the Justice Department.
The Carter Page warrant
That's
of
right.
October 21st, 2016. Thaddeus, I turn to you because as a recovering politician, I ask your help here to understand how this is viewed on Capitol Hill. On the one hand, for the Republicans, it's a distraction and annoying always to lose out to these headlines. On the other hand, it certainly is good for committees to have the fate of the nation turn on the next testimony or the next revelation. So how do politicians cynically and commonsensically regard Russiagate?
Well, you've pretty much analyzed the cynical part already. And if you don't know what a cynical politician looks like talking about Russiagate, just watch Adam Schiff or Swalwell on TV. Although, in fairness, I don't think many of you would watch those stations. The good thing about this is, and I believe from what we've seen and what we will continue to see come out, is you're going to see the police powers of the state and the intelligence agencies weaponized against people's political opponents for partisan gain. That is bigger than Watergate. That is a betrayal of the oath to the United States, and that's going to come out. And we are very lucky that Devin Nunes, Grassley, Graham, and Goodlatte do not take the cynical attitude to this and are doing what's in the best interest of the American people. And will continue to do so, despite this warrant.
I'm very glad you mentioned Chairman Nunes. Thaddeus and I disclose this all the time. We're very good colleagues with Devin Nunes.
Never heard of the man. Never heard of the man.
Thaddeus introduced me to Devin many years ago when he was in leadership in the House. And today, Thaddeus and I enjoy the information that we get from the House Intelligence Committee. We enjoy the contest the House Intelligence Committee has made of Russiagate. And we look forward to more. He's a very strong, very confident chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and we're very lucky to have him. But Seb, I go to you, because what we see from the so-called Nunes memo, which is really the memo of the House majority of the intelligence, what we see from Senator Grassley and Senator Graham in their letter to the Department of Justice making a criminal referral on Christopher Steele, what we see in there is the outlines of bad actors who were not only Democrats, but were part of the previous administration. Now, Seb, we understand that we need the FBI and we need the Department of Justice and we need the executive branch to work and function. However, the outline suggests that we're going to spend a nightmare ahead of us finding the truth here. Can Washington handle this? Can we both protect the American people and provide for prosperity and seek out the bad actors who are outlined in those documents?
If you have a very serious illness, sometimes you just have to take the chemo. And we have a very serious problem, because to summarize all the scandal down to its most trenchant point, last year, or during the end of the presidential election, we had one candidate and her party basically buy an illegal surveillance warrant against a member of the other candidate's team. That's what happened in America. Through their connections, through the political appointees, the Department of Justice, the FBI, they got the permission from a judge to spy on another American in a way that was illegal, hiding exculpatory information from that warrant application. That's political police. You're not allowed to spy on somebody for political reasons. That's something we have to get to the bottom of. Having the contacts you have, knowing the people on the Hill, the great individuals who really are exercising their oversight duties. Finally, Congress is exercising their oversight duties. It is clear this is the beginning. What we know is just the fraction. And I think beyond the Steele dossier, which is an outrage to begin with, there is an even larger scandal that will be unearthed, and that is the unmaskings. When you have a UN ambassador requesting 200 unmaskings of US citizens, she's not even part of the intelligence community. What are we talking about? That's the Obama administration, and we have to get to the bottom of it, John, whatever the cost.
The cost is high. Liz, the cost is very high. This is going to disrupt the markets. It's going to disrupt the economy. If I understand the scale of this, we're talking about the major leaders of the previous administration.
I agree. If we actually get to that point, it would be very disruptive. But I do wonder whether there's an appetite to carry it to its final conclusion. I hope so, because I think these people really misbehaved, and I think it's time that they were called out on it. And frankly, I also want to see the media start to cover this story, because I think we all know that the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, they have assiduously avoided covering the story. And I think that is really bad news, and it has to be fixed.
Thaddeus, the ad hominem on Devin Nunes, the ad hominem on anyone who speaks out for the facts of the revelations about the Steele dossier, the ad hominems are detestable. How do politicians hear that? When they're attacked daily, their persons are attacked, their families are threatened, their movement is limited because they're seeking to find the facts. That's their responsibility. How do they think that do you think this is part of the job? Do you think this isn't worth it? I'm not paid well enough? What happens?
No, especially in the case of Comrade Nunes, and others. What you wind up with is you have an elected official who understands the oath that he or she took, and that they're going to get to the bottom of this because what has happened is wrong. And so you just shut out the noise, and as Devin has said himself, you know you're over the target when you take the most flack. So the more they try to attack the messenger, the more they try to smear him, the more they try to intimidate other members against this, like Trey Gowdy and others. All that tells you is they can't defend the indefensible. They can't defend the proposition or the allegation, a fact of what they've done, so they attack the messenger. And that's what you're continuing to see. And you'll continue to see this because there's no defense for what they did. And the people who are investigating this have long ago made the determination when they first sought office and then took that oath that things like this were things they were going to get to the bottom of, regardless of whichever party it hurt, because it's wrong.
One more detail here. I want to emphasize this because it's what we talk about all the time. We're very early into this process, very early. Those who want to rush this are uninformed, and those who know what's going on or have an understanding of understanding, this is going to take much longer than this election cycle. And yet, and we have to do this, impeachment, Seb. For heaven's sakes, impeachment. It's the Democratic theme. It's what they have.
It's all they have. It's all they have, and it's absurd.
And I hold you responsible for Washington. What the heck is going on?
When you have no platform, John, you clutch in desperation. Literally on policies, what can they appeal to? We don't want Americans to be safe and we don't want you to prosper. Well, Nancy Pelosi probably realizes she can't campaign on that. So what's left? It's the crazies. It's the let's impeach him. But if they go down that avenue, I have a word of warning for them. They have no idea who they're dealing with. The idea of impeaching Donald Trump, this is a man who never gives up. And you know what? He will be outflanking them on Twitter every day, multiple times, and they will go down for the parody that they are. So really, it's desperation.
But
Liz,
I think that's right, and I also think there is this so-called enthusiasm gap. The left is very fired up to go and campaign against Donald Trump. They want to see impeachment, but I think on the right, I mean, it's generally the case that the incumbent party loses seats in the House. This is a very motivating issue. I hope everyone in this room and all the people you know are going to remember that this impeachment threat is out there, and it's a very good reason to give money and to go vote and to stir up all your neighbors and get them to vote too.
Again, I go back to the cynical side of being a politician. Thaddeus,
thanks.
If the Democrats have their dream and win majority control of the House of Representatives, they will move. They promised us. They've even named their leadership to impeach the president. My observation is that will reelect Donald J. Trump by about 400 electoral votes.
Well,
could be.
Look, fundamentally, the Democrats, and I hate to give them constructive advice.
Yes,
fortunately, they'll ignore it. So when you look at it, we went through this when George Bush was president. There was Bush derangement syndrome. I remember when President Obama was there. And people would ask us all the time, oh, you want President Obama to fail? And I'd say, no, I'm trying to give him constructive criticism to make things better for the American people. Whether he takes it or not is fine, and then you put it out. Because the way Americans view real life is, look, you're a Democrat, you may hate Donald Trump, but what are you doing for me, baby? What are you doing for me and mine? Other than hating Trump, because that ain't getting me nowhere. That's not getting me a job. It's not getting me a new car. It's not getting my kids in college. It's not keeping me safe and secure. So if you want to hate Trump, knock yourself out, but what are you doing for me? And all you hear out of them is, well, I'm hating Trump more. And Russia.
This is the John Batchelor Show. I'm with Sebastian Gorka, Liz Peek, and Thaddeus McCotter. We're discussing the strength of the Republican Party. And when we come back, the strength of the Republican Party for our children, the millennials. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. I'm at the American Conservative Union Cpac 2018, and I'm on stage with Liz Peek, Sebastian Gorka, and Thaddeus McCotter. We've discussed the larger themes for the Republican strength, but now we look to the future, the millennials. We are, those of us who are lucky enough to have children who are millennials, we understand that we're dad and mom, and therefore, okay. But we think about what they're going to remember. They're the institutional memory for what we're struggling with right now. So Liz, I want to start with you because you have elderly millennials and also bridging the gap here. You can see the millennials around you in New York. We're told that the millennials are keen on Barack Obama, keen on the Democratic Party. And yet at the same time, at least the millennials I know, which are my children, they've all got 401ks. The idea of me in 1969 having a 401k, I would have been drummed out of the boomers, absolutely asked to leave, but they've got 401ks. Is that going to bring them back to common sense?
Look, I think this is a teaching moment for millennials, right? The teaching moment is, guess what? You lower taxes, you lighten the regulatory burden, and the economy is unshackled and begins to grow, and that's good for everybody. And I think after 8 years of living in their parents' garage or whatever, this is an awakening. I think it's an incredibly exciting thing, and because we haven't had this kind of dialogue in a long time. So they all learn from their economics professors that Keynesian economics does this and that and so forth. They did not learn about Art Laffer and the Laffer curve. We're kind of having that replayed before us now, and I think it's really an incredible good time for them to learn a great deal about how the world works.
They're listening.
Yeah, they're watching it.
They're not just listening.
Yeah, they're living it.
They're doing it.
Exactly.
I mean, this is the fascinating thing about my children are millennials. Look at the internet. We hear all the things about Twitter is quietly censoring conservatives. Who is most active on the internet when it comes to young political products? It's not the left. I mean, if you look at the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Turning Point USA, the Charlie Kirks, the C.J. Pearsons, these are all hardcore conservatives. And it's not a message of hatred, it's a message of prosperity and safety. So we have a very interesting moment here where the conservative movement is still trying to define what Trumpism is. I mean, you know, the op-ed writers are still trying to define what Trumpism is. The millennials are doing it without reading National Review, without reading the op-ed pages of the Washington Times. You know, I myself, I'm not a millennial. I had to do it as well. I said, okay, let's do a video cast every day, Rebel TV. I have to have that audience understand what I understood from my parents who escaped communism. This is a fight you have to fight every 20 years. John, we thought we'd won this. November the 9th, 1989. Stake through the heart of communism, right? We're fighting the same argument. Laffer curve. Why are we discussing the Laffer curve in 2018? It should be in every textbook in America.
Right, and it isn't.
And it isn't. So exciting things are happening, Jean.
Thaddeus, the millennials, they do care about social issues, but they don't talk about them first. Are there social issues that the Republicans need to be more responsive to?
Well, first, I think you're underestimating millennials. Now, I'm not an aging hipster by any chance, but I am Gen X. So I've got to watch millennials, my children, and what you see in the studies are their positions stack up with Republican positions, especially on economic issues. They're very entrepreneurial, they're very creative. If anything, they tend to be more libertarian on the social issues than anything else. As for pro-life, I think we continue to see that the support for life continues to grow, especially when technology shows us that children can live at the age of 21 weeks, and you see the ultrasounds. Eventually, we're going to get there. But when you look at the millennials, the worst thing you want to do with any type of voter is look at them like, well, you're a millennial. It's like, no, it's an individual.
Right.
And so you put it forward to the individual. And what you'll see is these millennials will start to understand what works. Look, I was born, my father was an Irish Catholic Democrat, my mother was a moderate Republican, but I saw Reagan, I saw it worked. And I got to vote for him in '84, and I did. I've been a Republican ever since. What works, works. And for the millennials who live in a period of time where they have more ability from the communication revolution to be heard, to shape their own destinies in their hands on a laptop or a phone, are not going to want the government to run their lives for them in the long run. The passion of youth will ebb, reality will set in, and you'll realize that, you know, those cats in 1776 and on, they got it right. Liberty is the wave of the future, and totalitarianism and Weberian bureaucracy from the 19th century is not progressive, it is regressive, and I don't want any part of that. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. My generation did it, they will too.
We don't have Hollywood, we don't have television, we don't have the Washington Post, we don't have the New York Times, we don't have two of the big cables. We don't have all of that, and yet still they're going to listen to us. Seb?
Look, the President of the United States has 48 million Twitter followers. That's just Twitter. 48 million. I only get recognized as a Fox News figure at events like these by people over the age of 40. Everybody younger than 40 has no idea who I am. Why is that? Because they don't watch television, but they're watching other millennials doing 3-minute podcasts every day. This is what's happening. This is how we have to engage. And guess what? A lot of those people like the common sense attitude of the president. The president is two things, a patriot and a pragmatist. Yes. And that pragmatism cannot be denied, and even millennials can see that. And Thaddeus is absolutely right. This isn't an age group, this isn't an age cohort. These are Americans, and let's treat them as individuals.
Yeah. We've got 30 seconds, so I'm going to wrap this up by thanking all three of you for making this effort to come to me on stage. It's a whole lot easier when we do it on the telephone. a whole lot easier.
Less makeup.
Yeah, less makeup. But it's a pleasure to sit with you. It's kind of like television, I guess, except for we don't have 4-minute bites, we can talk. So I thank you very much, Liz, for coming.
Thank you.
I thank you, Thaddeus, for coming from Michigan. And Seb, I apologize for holding you responsible for Washington.
Yeah, that's tough.
I just live in the swamp. I'm not the swamp.
This is the John Batchelor Show at the American Conservative Union, Cpac 2018, and I thank everyone. I'm John Batchelor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marion Maréchal-Le Pen.
Bonjour, Cpac! Hello, my fellow conservatives. I hope that Americans really like French accent. Okay, and I hope too that you see me as less terrifying than the American media depicts me. Because it's crazy. Yesterday I was a fascist, today I am a socialist. Okay, why not? Whatever the media says, it is a real honor for me to add my French voice to this strong sea of patriotic Americans. And today, I have come to honor 240 years of friendship. Our friendship began long before the Normandy shores and the trenches of Belleau Wood, where the echo of your soldiers' bravery still resounds. Our alliance is knit in the quest for freedom. My country, France, was the first country to recognize your independence. It was by French blood spilt on American soil that our friendship began. Today, over 2 centuries later, here at Cpac, we are once again standing side by side in another battle for freedom. This freedom is a gift. Economic and political freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience are our common treasures. After 1,500 years of existence, it's us, the French, we now must fight for our independence. No France is no longer free today. French are not free to choose their policies, whether they are economic, monetary, on immigration, or even diplomacy. Our freedom is now in the hands of the European Union. This European Union is not Europe. It is an ideology that looks only to the future while being contaminated with historic amnesia. An ideology without land, without people, without roots, and without civilization. The EU is in the process of slowly killing millenary nations. I live in a country where 80%, you heard me correctly, 80% of the law are imposed by the EU. Our parliament's only purpose today is to endorse legislation voted by others. Let me be clear here. I'm not offended when I hear President Donald Trump say America first. In fact, I want America first for the American people. I want Britain first for the British people. And I want France first for the French people. That's why I fight for French diplomacy to keep its unique role, to act as a link between the East and the West. A long history has allowed us to form privileged ties with Africa, with Russia, with Asia, as well as the Middle East. We must be able to keep the ability to decide for ourselves our military and diplomatic decisions. Our forces are complementary. Like you, if we want to make France great again, we must defend our economic interests in the global market. The EU submits us to unfair competition with the rest of the world. We cannot accept a model that creates slaves in developing nations and unemployed in Western countries. I refuse the standardized world proposed by the EU. I consider that the people have the right to a historical continuity. All I want is the survival of my nation, to be able to pass on not only my tangible heritage, but also my intangible legacy. Vive la France! This young French generation is not encouraged to connect and love this cultural legacy. They are brainwashed with guilt and shame of their country. The result is the development of an Islamic counter-society in France. After 40 years of massive immigration, Islamic lobbies, and political correctness, France is in the process of passing from the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church to the little niece of Islam. And the terrorism is only the tip of the iceberg. This is not the France that our grandparents fought for. How did we get here? How did we get here? Because the EU and French governments forgot one crucial point. To open oneself to the outside, you must have a solid core. To welcome, you have to remain, and to share, you must have something to offer. Without nation and without family, the limits of the common good, natural law, and collective morality disappears as the reign of egoism continues. Today, even children have now become a merchandise. We hear now in the public debate, we have the right to order a child on catalog, we have the right to rent a woman's womb, we have the right to deprive a child of a mother or father. No, you don't. A child is not a right. Is this the freedom that we want? No, we don't want this atomized world of individual without gender, without father, without mother, and without nation. So, what do we want then? Finally, just like you, we want our country back. I came here to tell you that there is a youth ready for this fight in Europe today. A youth who believes in hard work, who believes in their flag means something, who wants to defend individual freedom and private property. A conservative youth who wants to protect their children from eugenics and from the gender theory delirium. A youth who wants to protect their parents from euthanasia and protect humanity from transhumanism. Like the American youth, the French youth is the heir of great nation. To whom much is given, much is expected. Our fight cannot only take place in elections. We need to convey our idea across the media, the culture, and the education to stop the domination of the liberal and socialists. That is why I have recently launched a School of Management and Political Science. What is the goal? To train the leaders of tomorrow. Those who will have the courage, the discernment, and the skills to defend the interests of their people. The challenge is immense. But the last 2 years have shown one thing: never underestimate the people. Only a battle unwaged is a battle already lost. Brexit in the UK, Manif pour tous in France, and of course the election of the President Donald Trump prove a fact. When the people are given the opportunity to take their country back, they will seize it. Through your actions and your talent, you have succeeded in putting conservatism right back on the top of the political agenda. Let us build on what you have achieved here, so that on both sides of the Atlantic, a conservative agenda may prevail. I finish with a Miller's quote that I like very much. A quote which sums up conservative modernity. Tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. You were the spark. It is now up to us to feed the conservative flame in our country. Vive les nations libres, vive les peuples libres, and long live the Franco-American friendship. Thank you. Merci.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is the biggest threat to the U.S.? A, China, B, Russia, C, rogue states, or D, all of the above? Please welcome our panel, Ambassador John Bolton, American Enterprise Institute, Ariel Davidson, Hoover Institution, Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, American Islamic Forum for Democracy, moderated by Breitbart London's Raheem Kassam.
I hope we don't have 5 minutes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having us, and a special thank you to our wonderful panelists here. I'm going to try and speak as little as possible because we have so much expertise here. I am grateful for Matt Schlapp and the ACU and all the hardworking staff who have made this happen. When Matt first asked me to moderate, I said, "How dare you?" And he said, "No, moderate a panel, not moderate your views." I said, "Okay, I can do that." So here we are. What are the largest threats to the United States? Is it radical Islam? Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it rogue states, rogue actors? Or secret answer D or E or F? All of the above. Well, there we go. We've answered the question now. We have such a wonderful panel here with us. Ambassador John Bolton, who really is such a personal hero of mine. The man who I'm sure so many of us hope and look forward to hearing a lot more from in policy areas over the next few years. I hope I haven't overstepped any mark there, Ambassador, but I say it often and I say it. We'll start with Ariel because I know the media need their Russia fix, so we'll get onto that. And Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is possibly one of the bravest people out there at the moment.
Yes, you are.
Dr. Jasser and his organization, he spends his time fighting the Sharia elements that are not just, as you heard from our previous speaker, digging the talons in all across the world, but right here in the United States too. Believe me, it is happening. And Dr. Jasser is on the front lines fighting radical Islam. And let me tell you, as somebody like myself who was born into a Muslim family and decided it wasn't for me, I doff my cap as many times a day as possible to someone like Dr. Jasser, who endures so many threats to himself and his family for doing what he does. So Dr. Jasser, thank you for everything you do here. So let's start, ladies first, with Ariel. The media have to have their Russia fix. And the question I want to ask from the start is, we've now heard about these indictments. We've heard about the meddling for some time. Still no collusion evidence. If you find any under your seats, let us know. If there's any collusion evidence out there, we can hand it off to the press. Look, my question for you, Ariel, is number one, what is the strategic threat that Russia poses? And have the likes of CNN actually become complicit with doing what we know some Russians, state actors, did want to do, which is disrupt American democracy?
Well, first off, thank you for that lovely introduction, Raheem, and thank you to the ACU and to Cpac in general for being here. So that's a really loaded question. I think what I'd like to start with is sort of the post-Cold War era that we're inhabiting. During the Cold War, we really were within a bipolar world in terms of we viewed our national security issues through the prism of communism, and we're not really afforded that simplistic luxury anymore, I would argue. And Russia, we're starting to see now at least under the auspices of Putin, is really trying to recapture that former greatness that was associated with the Soviet Union. And we're starting to see that as being the justification for forays into the Middle East, for increased relations in Asia, and violating the sovereign integrity of Ukraine. So when we talk about what is Russia's ambitions, is really to sort of recapture greatness. In Putin's mind, there's no such thing as a weak Russia. In order for Russia to exist, she must be great. And that is something that has been defining quite a bit of Putin's policy. Russia is the only country with which we have nuclear parity, so that for that reason, Russia will always hold a special place in our hearts in terms of how we view her through the prism of national security. I also do believe that Russia is in a very, I want to say, unique situation in which she's never really had a history of adhering to individual rights. It's always been about everything is done for the sake of the state of Russia. And that is something that has, again, defined quite a bit of national security policy. So going to your question, what does this mean for the United States? I think we have to approach our relationship with Russia very carefully, in the sense that she is not our primary foe, but I do believe that she is a non-actor. And in that case, I think we need to be very cognizant of the footprint that Putin is trying to expand across the globe, and be highly aware of that. I know Zudi's going to speak much more about that. In terms of the information warfare that took place, as we've seen with the latest Miller papers, that's par the course for Russia. So, you and I had talked about this earlier, Raheem. This organization, Российское сотрудничество, which is this 2008 propaganda arm that started in Russia, basically funds pseudo-NGOs across the globe in order to disseminate the Kremlin's narrative and to, quote, win over the hearts and minds of people in various countries to make them accept Russian supremacy, which is very bizarre. And the other thing they also like to do, which is going to answer the last part of your question, is they like to convince people that their current government is incompetent. And if we look at sort of the state of our media right now, there is an element in which the constant criticism and critique is, criticism is healthy. But at what point does it sort of become, are we establishing the idea that the US government is incompetent? And that to me is a very dangerous notion. There's a point at which criticism becomes almost unhealthy, and it's subversive in some ways. So, this is when Russian nationals engaged in these troll farms and these dissemination of propaganda, they really did their hope was to subvert and to create chaos, because that has been the mission of this propaganda arm, for the last 10 years, and decades before that. Russians are experts in information warfare. So hopefully that was
about Russia there. I thought you were talking about CNN for a moment.
Okay. So that gives you a little bit of it was a longer answer, but yes.
Ambassador Bolton, I want to bring you in on this, and hope as well we can expand into Russia and the Middle East, and of course, Dr. Jasser, and feel free to, just ignore me. I'm just here to facilitate. But if you guys want to jump in at any time, jump in. Ambassador Bolton.
Well, I think the Mueller indictment last Friday is a potentially very important opportunity for the Trump administration in dealing with Russia in its various threat manifestations. I think the president was rightly concerned politically that the endless drumbeat of the media that the Russian information campaign was to support Trump for president, for Trump against Hillary, that there was so much of it that people would come logically, if incorrectly, to the conclusion that the Trump campaign must be colluding with Russia. You couldn't have that much of a campaign without knowing Trump campaign involvement. The Mueller indictment, while it's far from the last word, let's be very clear, there's still a lot we don't know, but in its 100 paragraphs of explanation, eliminates, at least as far as we know, both those elements. There is no allegation of collusion by the Trump campaign or anybody else. And it's clear from the indictment that the Russian effort is an attack on the Constitution. It's to sow mistrust of our institutions, to corrode the public faith in our electoral process, and that it supports or opposes candidates as a means to that end, not the end in itself. So I would hope that the president, with this political leeway that the indictment gives, contrary to what the media are saying, but in reality, can now say in a very forthcoming way about Russian interference in our politics what he's already started to do about the Russian presence in the Middle East, what he's started to do about Russian interference in Central and Eastern Europe. The president should say no foreign power messes with American elections. Nobody around the world challenges the American Constitution. And I'll tell you this, I think we ought to retaliate for the Russian cyber attacks on our election process. I think the retaliation should not be proportionate. I think it should be decidedly disproportionate. I think this is to create structures of deterrence so that neither the Russians nor anybody else think about trying it again. I think that's the right policy, and here's the right politics for the president. In any debate between conservatives and liberals over who will defend the Constitution best, who do you think will win that debate?
Dr. Jasser.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things we missed, and if you look at the choices we had in this panel, it's Russia, China, rogue states, you missed that the pot stewing all of this is radical Islam. You have, if you look at the threats domestically in Europe, the terror attacks, there have been Uzbeki natives, Afghani natives, Bangladeshi natives. So every country that has a Muslim majority population is going through this battle between two evil fascisms. One is a secular military dictatorship fascism, and the other is theocratic fascism. Both are not our allies. There has to be third choices. And finally, now we have a president of the White House, we have parties controlling Congress that are no longer wasting all of our time in figuring out what the diagnosis is. We acknowledge as conservatives that the diagnosis is theocratic Islam. Islamism is the problem. So why don't we get on with the business of fixing this problem and looking for solutions? I'm the son of Syrian immigrants who are patriotic Americans because we embraced American freedom, the ability to practice our faith more freely than we could in any so-called Muslim country, but also they were American patriots because they rejected Soviet imperialism in Syria in the early 20th century, mid-20th century, rejected Baathism, rejected Islamism to come embrace American liberty. And what's happening is we are not taking sides in Syria, we're not taking sides in Iran. The greatest protection for American threats coming from Iran's nuclear program would be a revolution. And yet, where is American policy in taking sides on the people in the streets? We had President Trump tweeting out for a few days after the revolution started just a month or so ago, tweeting out support for the people on the streets, something President Obama never did. We need to follow through with that and convene a whole of government strategy where the greatest threat of the 21st century is political Islam, theocratic Islam. We need to convene a commission on radical Islamism that will begin to have a whole of government strategy through the State Department, through the Pentagon, through Homeland Security, where all of a sudden we look at immigration through the lens of not letting Islamists come here, but letting those who embrace our values, looking at our approach to Russia being, if they're going to support Shia Islamists and Hezbollah and genocide in Syria, that's certainly not our ally. Yet, again, we're not going to support Sunni Islamists like the Saudi royal family might be our short-term friends, but long-term, they're the founding fathers of ISIS's ideology. So we have to be careful if we don't come together as a nation, and especially as a conservative movement, and realize what ideas we stand for, not only what we're against, terrorism and communism and Islamism, but what are we for? We have to advance what we're for, and we finally, I think, have the ability and the president of the White House that can do that if we convene a commission and begin to shift the axis of discussion from CVE, which is countering violent extremism, to CVI, which is countering violent Islamism. And every one of you, I hope, goes back to your congressmen or women and tells them we need to shift from CVE to CVI.
There was once upon a time a whiteboard in the White House which had a lot of points on it, and one of those points was the prescription of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. When members of the administration will be watching this and reflecting upon what is being said, I hope, What do we have to say as a panel about the fact that there is no prescription of the Muslim Brotherhood yet? I think that is a pretty a simple thing to get done. It is something that was, as far as I am concerned, in the area of radical Islam, a core campaign promise. Ambassador Bolton, would you start us off on that?
I would have put the Brotherhood on the list of foreign terrorist organizations on January the 20th, 2017. I don't think there's any question about this. You know, too often our diplomats fall prey to the idea that whether it's the Irish Republican Army or any kind of terrorist group you mentioned, well, there's a humanitarian wing of Hezbollah, and then there's a political wing of Hezbollah, or a military wing. Likewise with the Muslim Brotherhood. It's one organization. It's motivated by one ideology. And to me, that's the fundamental issue here, to understand, as the Obama administration did not, but as I think as President Trump does, what we're fighting here is not a concept like violence. We're fighting a radical ideology that grows out of Islam, political Islam, call it what you will. That ideology detests Western civilization and America in particular. So we didn't create the ideology. We may not like having to deal with it, but if we don't acknowledge what we're fighting, we're never going to prevail.
I want to bring Dr. Jasser in on that, because I know there's a nuance that we discussed earlier that might have a bit of a counterpoint, and then Ariel.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much daylight there is between me and Ambassador Bull. I think I agree. I would nuance it and say that if you sort of globally declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terror organization, you're going to find, what about Al Jazeera, which is staffed with mostly Muslim Brotherhood? Does that become a terror satellite network? Maybe. But the bottom line is that you've got the Egyptian Brotherhood, which I think the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, which is the home base, the central nuclear cancer cell of the global Muslim Brotherhood, that should be labeled a terror organization. Hamas already is. Offshoots that are terror organizations should be labeled as such. But ideologues in London, Muslim Brotherhood has an office there. In America, we don't have religious parties, so therefore the Muslim Brotherhood never put its flag down or an office down, but yet there's a lot of believers in Islamism. As an Arab Muslim, I would tell you, as an Arab American, the Muslim Brotherhood is an ideology. In the Middle East, they don't carry cards, even in the Middle East where they have a party. There are many supporters of the Brotherhood that don't carry cards, but yet you know they're Brotherhood types because of the Islamist ideology. So just like when we were fighting the Cold War, we understood the American Communist Party was not our ally. We're not the place to go to for help in fighting the Soviets, but we didn't shut them down. We allowed them the freedom to speak out so that we could monitor them, and we realized that they were a threat and precursors to significant threats, but we didn't necessarily shut them down. I think similarly, Muslim Brotherhood type organizations in the West, as long as they're not advocating terror and violence, it's easier to monitor them when they're above ground than when you push them underground. And the Middle East dictatorships are classic examples of this. Whenever they've pushed the Brotherhood underground, they come back 5 to 10 years later to really wreak havoc in their society.
Ariel, we haven't yet touched on China, and I hope you'll give us a little bit of insight into China. When President Xi gets up and gives his 300-hour-long speeches, he's not talking about here's how we plan to defeat America, or here's how we plan to dominate the world. He's declaring we've already done it. I mean, when we're having this conversation about what the greatest threat to America is, the Chinese think they've already won.
Right. Well, I actually will sort of combine what I was going to respond to Zuhdi and
Sure.
an answer to your question. So I think that our biggest threat will always, not always, but for right now, is radical Islamic ideology as opposed to a nation state, primarily because an ideology can go through several different iterations, and when you think or you suppose that it might have been quelched or stomped out in one region of the world, it can regrow itself, it can spread, it transcends borders, and it doesn't require a ton of funding. If you think about the way in which ideology spreads now through social media, you can use all sorts of platforms that don't require any sort of real monetary backing behind it. And so it makes messages very accessible. For instance, one of the greatest issues that they're having, the window between, or the connection between ISIS and Europe for quite a bit of time, at least 2015, 2016, was Russia. And quite a bit of ISIS videos were coming out, propaganda videos and recruitment videos were being done in Russian. I've seen them myself. And it's alarming, and it's also one of those ways in which ideology, again, doesn't need to belong to a nation state. It can attract followers from around the globe. And I think that's what makes it tremendously dangerous, and that's why I would agree with Sudi 100%. In terms of China, China is in an interesting position right now relative to the United States and Russia. It has a better relationship with US and Russia than United States and Russia have with each other. It's in, as its power is growing, Russia's power is waning. And we're starting to see sort of a greater Eurasian alliance as opposed to Russia sort of trying to join itself with Europe, as have been the primary attempts that Putin had made prior to 2014 Ukrainian crisis. So, China, I think Ambassador Bolton will probably have more to say about that, but I do think that China is trying its best to walk a fine line between, maintaining its status as an economic powerhouse, which it's facing a demographic crisis in the coming decades. So we'll see what the result of that will be. But I do believe that, China is in a very unique position, and I'm curious to see where it goes forward from here. It is 10 times the size. It's the largest country population-wise in the world. So.
Ambassador Bolton, the Chinese are sort of declaring victory in this, what they perceive as a long war here. But the North Korean stuff, I mean, I don't think the media has truly recognized that President Trump really, in a lot of ways via Twitter, managed to shut down Little Rocket Man, or at least bring Little Rocket Man to the table. A, have the Chinese won, and B, what do you think is lacking in terms of the recognition about what this president has done on the international stage?
Well, I think on the China question, we have suffered as a country for several decades by operating under the assumption that prevails in the business community, prevails in the U.S. government, prevails in academia, that China is engaged in a peaceful rise, that's one buzz phrase, and that it simply seeks to take its place, its rightful place in the community of nations, and that we simply have to accept this. Now, that is one possible scenario for China, but it's not the only scenario, and the idea that it's going to become a responsible stakeholder, another buzz phrase in the international system, is only one possible outcome. I think the real pattern of Chinese behavior is incredibly aggressive and assertive. They're building bases on rocks and reefs in the South China Sea that are, on a good day, are only 3 inches above water. They are today mapping the seabed of the Indian Ocean. And they're not doing it to find fish. They want to know where they can put their submarines when they develop an undersea fleet. This is a very aggressive development. There's a panel on China tomorrow. We'll talk more about it. But what we require is a comprehensive American strategy. The President has raised the issues of Chinese violations of their obligations under international trade agreement, their piracy of intellectual property, their discrimination against foreign investors and business people in China. That's an important aspect, but we need a politico-military strategy as well, and we need what we had in the Cold War of linkage, that all of these issues are together, and if China wants to know how we will treat them, it depends on how they behave across the board. I do think President Trump now has convinced both North Korea and China that Barack Obama is no longer president, which is the single most important thing that he could do. But make no mistake, as CIA Director Mike Pompeo said recently, North Korea is within a handful of months, his phrase, handful of months, to having the capability of dropping thermonuclear weapons on any American city they want. So the Trump administration has some very hard decisions to make in the very near future. If China really believed what they've said for 25 years, which is that they don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, now is the time for them to act. And if they don't act, and act dispositively as they could, it'll tell us a lot about China.
We've got about a minute and a half left, Sudi.
Yeah, I think a really important point is a lot of these different responses that state dictators would have to America come on the heels of how they perceive us. It is time, and as President Trump has begun to do, Secretary Mattis has done with the almost complete decimation of ISIS, they realize that America has to be reckoned with. And that reckoning means, I mean, how many of you think that actually with ISIS almost gone, that radical Islamic threat will go away? Nobody. So the reason is you have Erdogan radicalizing his population to the Islamist caliphate movement, the Khomeinists radicalizing their population. You have the Saudis still pushing Wahhabism. Maybe they're marginalizing brotherhood ideology, but still Wahhabism. The Islamic Republic of Pakistan. You have Egyptian Islamism. All over the world, Islamism is still thriving, and we are not on the offense. We need to start realizing that not military, we're never going to win this militarily. We can do the whack-a-mole thing militarily, but until we take liberty and freedom on the offense in an information war, just like the Russians have had here, the Islamists send their immigrants and send their ideas here, we have to take the ideas of liberty in Arabic and Farsi and every language to begin to have an offense for countering violent Islamism, not just extremism.
Well, I wish we had more time. Iran and Venezuela and more on North Korea and everything. We could have touched on so many things, but I want to thank our panelists here for really laying out what are the core national security threats for the United States. And thank you all of you guys for being here and supporting. Thank you, Ambassador John Bolton, Ariel Davidson, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Cheers.
This way.
Judicial Watch is in federal court right now battling deep state bureaucrats who want to impose their own agenda behind closed doors and in secrecy. Judicial Watch wants to protect the rule of law and the Constitution. Follow us on YouTube now. The politicians don't want you to know what they're up to. Secret slush funds, secret emails, and pay to play. Judicial Watch is your watchdog in Washington, D.C., shining the light of transparency on our nation's capital. Follow us on social media for the latest updates. Don't you agree we need voter ID and clean election rolls? Well, your Judicial Watch is in federal court right now fighting to make sure your elections will be fair and honest. Follow us on Instagram.
You can be told to run, or you can choose to run. Both get you moving, yet one just goes through the motion. The other has purpose, meaning, freedom. What about your health care? Are you being told, going through the motion? Or are you choosing something better? Liberty HealthShare has a purpose. It unites people to share in the burden of health care. A true community that cares for you in your time of need. Free from interference and constraints that gives you back the power of freedom. It's time to exercise your purpose, time to exercise your meaning. It's time to exercise your freedom. Liberty HealthShare.
We are coming together at a crucial time in our nation's history. America is making great strides towards freedom and liberty, but she also confronts determined foes and faces enormous challenges. Challenges that strike directly at the core principles that all of us here hold so dear. Free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional values, and national security. Across America and the world, we see where liberalism has left its devastating mark. In homes, in schools, in communities, and in capitals. That's why our work is so important, and it's what the Heritage Foundation is all about. At Heritage, we're not just a bulwark against the left, we're a battleship for liberty. We are determined to guide America to renewed greatness and to take the fight to liberalism. That's why I'm so proud to serve as the Heritage Foundation's president, and why I'm so honored to join with you here at Cpac in the fight for the greatest nation on earth.
Ladies and gentlemen, a conversation with the Honorable Don McGahn, interviewed by the President of Hillsdale College, Dr. Larry Arnn.
favorite song? Is that your favorite song?
No, I didn't pick it. I didn't pick the tune.
Hello. If you're here and you think America might be in trouble, you probably think the most important man in America is Donald Trump, and I think that. But very high on the list after him would be his White House counsel, Don McGahn, who's doing some of the most interesting and important things in the administration. And we're going to start by Don telling us what a White House counsel is.
Sure. The counsel to the president is a appointed position directly answerable to the president. It is not a career spot. I am appointed by President Trump. The White House counsel's office has existed since about 1943. It is the primary legal advisor to the president, where I advise the president on a range of issues from constitutional law, executive power, whether or not we can go to war, judicial selection, administrative law, essentially government law that the president has to encounter on a day-to-day basis.
And that involves you in just about everything.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Hard for you to say I didn't do it. So one of the best things about the Trump administration has been the number of judges it's got confirmed and the quality of them. What do you have to do with that?
Well, I guess I'd say I'm the primary advisor to the president on that, and try to give the president the advice, my best advice and counsel on who he should nominate. Under the Constitution, the power of nomination is vested with the president expressly in the Constitution. But he cannot simply appoint judges. He has to go through the Senate. It's called the advice and consent clause. So with the advice and consent of the Senate, he can then appoint judges. So it's a time-consuming process. I'm the one who handles the Senate contact mostly. The Senate over time has required quite a bit of consultation with them on judges. So it's not the sort of thing the president can merely do on his own. It's a team effort between the president and the Senate. And I'm the one that has to walk into the Oval Office and advise the president on various recommendations. Ultimately, he makes every decision. He's very engaged in it. He ran on the idea of the judicial branch needing some help. He's delivered on those promises, and I'm really honored to be the person who's most involved in it at the staff level.
What do you look for in a judge?
Well, what the president looks for first are people with excellent credentials, the right sort of temperament, the usual things you hear. But what the president likes are folks who have demonstrated some sort of courage, some sort of ability to stand strong in the face of adversity. People who you know when they get on the bench, they will not change and turn into someone else. What I do in my analysis before I bring it to the president is look for precisely the qualities I know the president wants. And we look for things in a person's background that actually demonstrate that they have a commitment to the notion of a rule of law, meaning that there are standards that are set forth, preferably in legislation enacted by the elected representatives of the people, and whether they're going to give that full measure or are they going to be inclined to create the law on their own. Are they going to stand strong in the face of public criticism? Are they going to respond to the editorial pages, or are they going to read the law as written? Oftentimes, you can get a sense of a person through an interview process of how strong they're going to be or how strong they're not going to be. Sometimes someone looks wonderful on paper, but in actual practice, you get a sense that they're not going to follow through. Other folks look very good on paper, but you get a sense they really have some fortitude. So the president really looks for folks who, not surprisingly, have demonstrated the ability to stand strong as he has his whole life. So he kind of looks for folks that he can relate to that way.
So there's two things happening, and I wonder if they're coincidental. One is there's a major effort in the Trump administration, coherent and strategic and articulated, to try to do something about reining in the regulatory state. And Justice Gorsuch is an expert on those kinds of issues and the Chevron doctrine. Talk about that.
Well, it's not a coincidence. It's part of a larger plan, I suppose. Justice Gorsuch is, I think, going to be a tremendous justice. It's been an honor to get to know him in the process of the president selecting him to be on the Supreme Court. The thing that did stand out in his record, as you note, is his track record on speaking about administrative law, You mentioned Chevron, sort of explain, if people have heard this idea of Chevron deference. What that is a reference to a Supreme Court case from 1984, which is the case often cited by courts to give deference to unelected agencies' determinations as to what the law is. In other words, there's a statute, in theory a statute, and then the regulations passed, and is that regulation consistent or not with the statute? I'm oversimplifying it, but what has happened over time is courts are increasingly deferential to the unelected agencies when it comes to making the law. Of course, the legislative power is vested in the legislature under Article 1 of the Constitution, not in unelected agency heads. Justice Gorsuch, when he was on the 10th Circuit, Judge Gorsuch wrote a very, very important concurring opinion on the idea of Chevron deference, asking whether or not it's constitutional. And a very, very well-written opinion cited by many, certainly his standout opinion at the 10th Circuit. And his view was that courts ought not defer to unelected agency heads. It's for the courts to say what the law is. It's for the legislature to pass the law. It's for the executive to enforce the law. And what really resonated with the president was here was a person with impeccable credentials, wonderful character, great man, but frankly stuck his neck out on an issue that anyone else would fear may hurt their chances of promotion to the higher court. But Judge Gorsuch is not that kind of person. And he is sort of leading the vanguard on this. And you see this catching on more and more. There was a time not long ago where no one really spoke of administrative law or the administrative state or whatever one wants to call it. And now you see more and more legal conferences on this. Federalist Society had their annual lawyers conference last year. The whole topic was administrative law. So this is something that the president has a great focus on curbing the unelected from the idea of over-regulation. If one looks at the amount of regulation that we've had passed over the years, if one does a visual, the amount of regulation in the 1960s was maybe this much, and now it fills warehouses of things. And at a certain point, one needs to say enough is enough. So there is definitely a focus on that. On the judicial piece, not only now Justice Gorsuch, but other judges, one of the things we interview on is their views on administrative law. And what you're seeing is the president nominating a number of people who have some experience, if not expertise, in dealing with the government, particularly the regulatory apparatus. This is different than judicial selection in past years. Perhaps there were single-issue litmus tests and that kind of thing. This president's looking for a well-rounded, holistic person who really understands separation of powers, the role of the regulatory state, the role of the legislature and the executive. So there is a coherent plan here where actually the judicial selection and the deregulatory effort are really the flip side of the same coin.
So one would think Congress would have a huge stake in this because Article 1 starts out all the legislative powers herein granted. And that's interesting because Article 2 about the president and Article 3 about the judges don't have that word all. But now 20 times, I think, is the amount of the laws that are made in America are made in the bureaucracy. And in fact, since the number of laws passed by the Congress in the last 100 years has not really changed, that's what makes big government possible. What do you think can be done about that? What should Congress do, and what can the executive branch do?
Well, with Congress, this is not something that happened overnight. This has been happening for decades and decades and decades. So you cannot really get particularly mad at any particular member of Congress. But there's safety in numbers, I suppose, on that. What has happened is over time, Congress has passed broad sweeping statutes that are not particularly detailed. They give broad power to administrative agencies. The EPA, for example, is told to make the air clean and the water clean. Well, there's not a lot of detail on that, which leaves the bureaucracy to fashion what would otherwise be thought of as legislation. Congress used to legislate more. They don't seem to legislate much anymore. They tend to do broader statutes that abdicate, frankly, the legislative power. And again, this is not a recent thing. This has been building up for decades and decades and decades. It really goes back to probably Woodrow Wilson, probably a little bit before, the idea of having sort of unelected experts make the big decisions, getting politics out of the political decisions. Not really the way it's supposed to work in our country. You're supposed to have elected representatives who pass the laws and are accountable. Which brings me to next thing Congress can do, in addition to, wasn't intended to be an applause line, but thank you for the three in the front. It's dry stuff, I know. Shout out to stage left. So the first thing, Congress could legislate and actually focus on the meaning of the words. I ran a federal agency once upon a time, and I had met with another agency head who came to have lunch with me and get some tips on how to run agencies. And she was a former member of Congress, and she said if she knew then, when she was in Congress, what she knew as running an agency, it would have completely changed her view on meaning of legislation. Too often, Congress debates various little micro changes in language, and they fight each other to a draw, and each side comes away thinking they won the debate, merely to just take the decision and shift it over to a more unaccountable, unelected branch. It's not really it's kind of its own branch of government now. And then those decisions tend to trend to the left. So when the legislature punts, the gap gets filled in a way that usually is not in the favor of liberty. So the first thing would be for Congress to pay attention more to the details of legislation. Second, oversight is very important. Congress does have power to police its legislation and to conduct oversight on how its legislation is actually working out. They ought to do that. It's counterintuitive for the counsel to the president of Executive One to encourage the Congress to do oversight, but they ought to do that. They ought to really roll up their sleeves and see how this legislation works out, not just do the sort of oversight that gets headlines, but do oversight that really gets into the nitty-gritty of how laws are being implemented, and it gives them the tools they need to perhaps change laws. There's a number of statutes that have been on the books for years and years and years, and they continue to sort of proceed apace without much in the way of review. Periodically, Congress ought to take a hard look at some of these major pieces of legislation and see if they're still working as intended. Chances are they're not. They've gotten well beyond what Congress originally thought they were doing. And the third thing Congress can do is to read, with all due respect, read the Constitution and realize that there are powers that belong to the Congress and the Congress only. There are enumerated powers. The executive branch really doesn't have enumerated powers. All executive authority is vested in the president. It makes my job a little more challenging. I don't have a list of enumerated powers I can look to when I advise the president on what he can and can't do. It's a more general executive power. Congress sometimes wants to do executive kind of things, sometimes judicial things. Judges seem to want to fill in gaps and write a little law. The executive branch wants to write a little law. What Congress can do is to try to join us in an effort to try to reframe who does what in a way much more consistent with the original text and meaning of the Constitution. There's three branches for a reason. The president is committed to this. He ran on this. I mean, when President Trump as a candidate talked about judicial selection, this was a shorthand for the idea of rule of law and the constitutional order and getting us back to basics. He did it very effectively, and that's what he's doing. There's so much that's going on you don't read about in the mainstream media on this, but there's so much good work going on trying to restore us back to the fundamentals, and thus accountability to the people, precisely the kind of people that elected President Trump to do what he's doing now.
It's remarkable to me. There's a promise that you'll repeal 2 regulations for every one passed. The ratio is better than that, right?
Way better, yes.
Way better.
Yeah.
And
that's how President Trump does things. He always he overshoots the expectation. There's an what you're talking about, executive order. President wanted this out of the gate, and one of the things I do is help draft these executive orders. So I'm the scribe sometimes in the back room writing this up. But it's an executive order specifically on regulatory review and fundamental change. And one of the aspects of this you mentioned is this idea of 2 for 1. And the executive order directs executive branch agencies when it comes to making regulations. For every new regulation, you need to remove 2 from the books. So you don't have this constant piling up of regulations on top of regulations. We've done some numbers on this. Apparently the ratio is 22 to 1, so it's been wildly successful. We're very proud of that. There was a number of regulations passed in the last year or two of the previous administration, quite hastily, and a lot of what's been removed from the books are those regulations. So that's just the beginning. There's also something called the Congressional Review Act, which Congress has used for the first time in the first year of administration. There have been a couple examples where they've done this, but this is a law that allows Congress to essentially veto regulations. Part of the deal is when they cede their legislative power to the executive, they have to have a final say under this statute. And Congress rightly struck a number of regulations, and we hope that they continue to do that. So the 2-to-1 comes from an executive order, and it shows that how much the president is committed to cutting through the red tape and getting back to the more familiar structure that our founders and previous generations had if one were to rely on the Constitution.
So I think we have to close, but congratulations and thank you. Fabulous year.
Hey, thank you.